The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience 2019 Masters DraftKings Millionaire Maker picks and preview. Ben Rasa and Rick Gahmen will be joining me in just a bit to break down every player, every price, and every decision you're gonna need to make to compete for the $1 million top prize on DraftKings for the Masters. Plus, some special guests will be making cameos, giving their favorite sleepers, busts, core players, and pick to claim the highest sartorial honor sports has to offer. Plus, a few things before we dig in. I talked to my accountant, and apparently, shocking to me, I got too much money, and I gotta give some away. This is great news for you, however, because there's over $1,000 worth of giveaways up for grabs if you want some, like a ticket to the $555 800,000 guaranteed DraftKings contest, 2 $150 3-max spots, and enough Millie Maker giveaways to keep you busy. All you need to do is enter. There's a bunch of ways to do it. I recommend doing all of them to potentially win as many times as possible. Here's how you get in the draw. First, subscribe, download, and leave a review for the audio podcast. 5 stars, your DraftKings handle, something nice about the show. Do that on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify. Next, smash the like button for this video. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Give me your pick to win the Masters. Pretty easy stuff so far, but there's more ways to win. Follow me on Instagram @thepme. Like the Masters picture I got posted, along with your DraftKings handle, and maybe say something nice too. My wife reads this shit, and you'll get preferential treatment. Finally, there's the sharing method, Twitter and Facebook. Follow me, that's a given. Then whenever you see a show, share it. I want as many views, clicks, and listens as possible for this content. So every time you share one of those shows, podcasts, or articles from Masters Week, and there's gonna be a lot, retweet it, share it, and reply or comment with your DraftKings handle, and you too will be in the draw. And that's retweet and reply. If you do that thing where you reply over the retweet, you're automatically disqualified. And no, I hate you because of it. On the real, that shit sucks. Now, the more you do this properly, the more chances you have to win the big prize. And winners will be announced on next Tuesday's show, so don't miss that one either. I'm not done with the giveaways yet. If you want to get a year-long membership to FantasyNational.com, the premier stat database and golf gambling and daily fantasy tool site on them's interwebs, all you need to do is follow @FantasyNational on Twitter, retweet the pinned tweet at the top, and reply with the hashtag FNMasters. In the meantime, just become a member now to get yourself prepped for the Masters with the easy-to-use tools like the custom stat model, ownership projections, tournament simulator, mixed condition model, head-to-head matchup history, course breakdowns, course history, player notes, and guess what? There's even more. Just become a member. It's the main tool I use, and you really should too. Become a member at FantasyNational.com now! Okay? Finally, I probably buried the lead on this, but the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League is fucking gigantic for the Masters. Only $10 to enter, and you can only play 3 lineups, and there's $100,000 guaranteed in the prize pool. $7,500 for first place. Best part? It's rake-free, meaning DraftKings isn't taking a cent in commission on this tournament. I battled to get it to be $100K, and they gave it to me, so please, join the contest. It really is the best one on DraftKings. And as the 3-max entry, whether you want to do a 3, 2, or 1 entry, no one's going to be at a severe disadvantage. Plus, it's only $10 to play. The link to the contest is in the description of this video and podcast. And if we fill it fast, we'll get an even bigger one, rake-free, next time around. So please, go join that. Now that we got that all out of the way, that housekeeping, let's talk Masters. There are currently 86 players in the field for Augusta, but off the hop, let's trim down that player pool. Well, it's not impossible to have an amateur or a senior win the winning lineup in the Millionaire Maker, since they could top 10. You will need the wearer of the green jacket by week's end if you want any shot at the big money. And since you only get 6 roster spots, wasting one on a guy who's not gonna win doesn't seem very sensible. It's fun to chuck Fred Couples or Bernhard Langer in a lineup, especially with the savings, but spoiler alert, they ain't winning, so don't take them. And in such a small field where the top 50 in ties and any player within 10 strokes of the lead makes the cut after 2 rounds, you may want to leave some of your salary cap on the table. Anywhere from $300 to $1,000 should prevent you from getting your lineup duplicated. It's not necessary, but if you win, I doubt you want to split the money with someone else, or maybe 5 people. That would be horrible. Oh, and just because you get all 6 of your players through the cut this week doesn't guarantee you a single cent. Most weeks, that's enough to at least min cash. At the Masters, too many people are going to be sporting 6s, and you're going to have to sweat this one to the very end. For the course, Augusta National is a par 72, which plays longer than its listed 7,435 yards due to the incredible amount of elevation shifts across the course. There's no rough, so you can finally use the search word sprayers outside of Pornhub, but there are 41 bunkers, 6 water hazards, and a slew of pine straw scattered across the grounds. But unless there's an untimely tree in the way, the pine straw isn't going to be the end of the world. The bent grass greens are around tour average in size. However, the major difference are the wild undulations on the putting surfaces. These are some of the most hilly and likely fastest the players are going to encounter all year. The speed and bumps are one of the big reasons course history plays more of a significant factor at Augusta than any other course. A first-timer, or debutant, as they're called in the South, hasn't donned the green jacket since Fuzzy Zeller in 1979. This year, 17 players received their first Masters invite, including the Great Dane, Lucas Beauregard, Brits Eddie Pepperell and Matt Wallace, and PGA regulars Kevin Tway, Aaron Wise, and Killer Keith Mitchell. So I'm not saying avoid them, they probably just don't have a great shot at winning. The key stats for Augusta, this is the tricky part, because despite using thermal imaging on surfaces, computerized irrigation, and sensor data to regulate the watering of the grounds, Augusta National refuses to release their strokes gained metrics to the public. To veer on the safe side, lean towards players who rate out positively in all 3 aspects of tee to green, because, well, it will be an immaculate ball striking performance that will win. The field only has around a 60% rate of greens in regulation, well below tour average. So short game is going to matter to avoid gigantic blowups. You can focus on putting if you want, but Augusta National has spit out enough poor putters as champions that you'll make yourself mad when all of a sudden Tony Finau is making every 10-footer instead of his usual misses from 3 feet. Experience on these greens matter more than the actual putting stats. Ben and Rick are coming up momentarily to break down all of the elite players in the field. But first, I've gathered some of the golf community together to give me the players they're building their DraftKings lineups around for the Masters in 2019.
Do you even lift, bro?
You got all this money, so why not spend it on someone awesome? At the top, most are going to spend on Rory McIlroy, and I can't fault anyone for that because Rory rules. He's playing great, has 5 top 10s in a row at Augusta, but Dustin Johnson is just as good and will come in at lower ownership. And he shouldn't, because their form is about equal. DJ has a win in 4 top 10s in a row. He also possesses 3 consecutive top 10s at the Masters, but there are 2 factors which separate the two for me, both in DJ's favor. One, he doesn't have the pressure of chasing the career Grand Slam. Despite coming through with the players, it does seem like the added pressure can always get the best of Rory at times, whereas DJ always looks like he's heavily medicated, and even slapping him in the face wouldn't draw a reaction. That's observational though, pure narrative guesswork. What's not is they're playing extreme wind. If the wind picks up or conditions get cold, DJ will not be affected. They're both the best in optimal conditions, but if things get blustery, it's DJ who I want to have on my roster. But I don't speak for everyone though. Drew Matthews from FantasyGolfBag.com won the Masters DraftKings Millionaire Maker last year, so you may want to listen to him. Drew, who you building around?
Mr. Matt Kuchar at 7.9K, coming in with really good form. Obviously loves Augusta, Georgia guy, plays good there. I'm playing Kuchar. 7.9K is too good of a price to pass up.
Davis Maddock from Daily Roto. Who are your core players?
Xander Schauffele at 8,500. He's my favorite golfer in the $8,000 range, which is in general a great range to select your core plays from because they fit in so many different lineup constructions. You can fit Xander and Rory. You could use Xander in a build where you're using a bunch of 8 and 9K golfers, and his stats on tour this year are more than solid. He's 4th on tour in strokes gained total, 13th on tour in strokes gained tee to green, 28th on tour strokes gained off the tee, and 15th in strokes gained approaching green. He also has already won on the PGA Tour, and we don't find very many first-time winners at the Masters. He has the game to win a major. He has the game to work at Augusta, where the most important stat is going to be strokes gained approach, where Xander is amongst the class of the tour. And by the odds provided by Data Golf on dailyroto.com, he is amongst the 10 best golfers in the field in terms of percentage chances to get a top 20. So my selection for favorite core play is Xander Schauffele.
DK Live's Jeff Ulrich, who's going to appear in most of your lineups.
I'm going with Hideki Matsuyama. And he's pretty much just everything you want in a core play, I think. He's affordable. It's only $8,700. That's less than $9K. That's pretty good. He's dependable. He's made 10 of 10 cuts this year. Again, pretty good. He's experienced. He's played the Masters 7 times already, Pat. And the last 4 times he's played, he's finished inside the top 20. So that's pretty good too. And he's coming in good form. Second in strokes gained approach. Second in strokes gained tee to green. And Pat, so people on the internet have told me those are important stats. I just like the way Hideki looks coming in. Yes, sometimes he putts like he's got a rattlesnake in his hand. But look, if Adam Scott and Sergio Garcia can win the Masters, is putting really that important this week? I don't think so. I like this range for Hideki. You look underneath them, the players, not in that good form, maybe don't have the best record at the Masters, but Hideki at 8,700, easy to fit in, dependable, experienced.
Reed Fowler, which guys are you heavily leaning on at the 2019 Masters?
Favorite core play of mine is going to be Justin Thomas at 10,200. I will say this, whenever you can get JT as the fifth highest priced guy here at Augusta, but not in the top 2 in salary, that's extreme value. I know he hasn't been playing well, but I'm not too worried about Honda or even a WGC match play, or even Sawgrass, because if you look before those finishes, he had a bunch of top 10s, a few top 3s in those finishes before those not so good ones. If you have a guy who's coming in top 10 in ball striking over the last 24 rounds, top 3 in around the greens in the last 24 rounds, and that's what you're going to need here at Augusta. So I'm not too worried, especially, and I'm going to hammer this point home, 10,200 for one of arguably the best players on the PGA Tour this season.
Do you even lift, bro?
It's finally time to bring in Ben Rasa from Awesemo.com and Rick Gahmen from the Rick Run Good YouTube channel and DFSOnDemand.com to talk about all of the players in the field for the Masters in 2019, starting at the very top. Ben, we're going to jump right into this, and I'm going to start with you. Rory McIlroy, are you in or are you out? Because everyone, they seem to be in.
Yeah, that's my one hesitation. I'm always in on Rory. Obviously, I've been waiting for him to kind of get back to where I think he should be, which is at the top of every single tournament price-wise. He's going to be really popular. I'm not sure how much leverage you're going to need to make a real position on him, but it's hard not to like him with the way he's playing.
Yeah, at $11,600, Rick, he comes in with immaculate form. Obviously, he lost to Tiger at the match play, but before that, he had finishes of 1st, 6th, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 4th to begin the year. And then at the Masters, he has 5 straight top 10s as well. Like, can you see yourself getting away from Rory even at this price, even at the expected ownership?
No, he's so clearly lapping the field in some of these categories. He's gaining strokes in every single category. His tee to green game is immaculate. The difference between Rory and Hideki, who is number 2 in tee to green, is basically the same gap between Hideki and Gary Woodland, who's 6th. I mean, he's literally lapping the field. He's got everything that we're looking for. And we've seen master builds tend to be a lot more balanced because the pricing is so soft and you can throw a lot of names in there. So yeah, I expect Rory to be popular, but there's also a lot of other places you can go. I'm not sure he's going to be I don't know what the number is, but I'm not sure he's going to be significantly the highest owned golfer on the slate.
I think that he'll end up being the highest owned of the plus 10K golfers, depending on different stuff that shakes out. Like, is there going to be a groundswell for Justin Rose? Probably not if people only look at course history. But the next guy on the list is the one I'm really intrigued by, and it's Dustin Johnson, because I think a lot of people saw what happened at match play. Obviously, he didn't advance out of the group stage. He lost to Brennan Grace. He's $300 cheaper than Rory. He also has an excellent track record at Augusta, but people might have it lingering in the back of their minds like, oh, he was the favorite to win. He was definitely going to win the Masters 2 years ago, and then he had an injury or a sex swing type of deal. I don't know what happened, but he didn't play. So he didn't end up winning that year. But at $300 cheaper, can you make the case that Dustin's actually a better play than Rory here, Rick?
I can make the case that he's a more consistent play. So if you look at the percentage of rounds that he gains strokes, basically however you slice it, tee to green total, he's upwards of like 85%, which out of these 10K guys or more, he's one of the most consistent golfers. So I think if you ran this tournament 100 times, DJ is probably in a much more consistent finishing position than someone like Rory. But Rory, obviously, both these guys can win this tournament. But I'd argue that he's probably a pretty good pivot just because of how, public Rory has been over the course of the last couple of weeks with the win, playing Tiger in the match play, DJ not getting out of his pod, all that good stuff.
So DJ coming in, Ben, 4 consecutive top 10s in stroke play outside of the match play. Obviously, he won the WGC Mexico. And it's one of these things. The one thing that I like about Dustin over Rory in this spot is he doesn't seem to have the pressure to win the Masters that Rory's going to have. He's going for the career Grand Slam. I know that's something that we can't quantify, but it does linger as a narrative in the back of my mind. But the big thing that I like about Dustin, even over, maybe not Justin Rose, but the other guys near the top, above $10,000, is if this course gets cold or it gets windy, and obviously we're not going to know that right now, I trust Dustin to be at the top of that leaderboard where I don't trust Rory in bad conditions.
So I'm with you. I think you kind of we're going where I was going to say, if that's the case, though, for me, and I know we're going to get to Justin Rose, that's probably where I'll go. It's always interesting when you have a guy who, all these guys are going to garner ownership, but Dustin is going to be in a weird spot because a lot of people are just going to take Rory. And if they don't, I think they're just going to naturally pay down and maybe try to take 2 of the next, handful of golfers. So DJ's in an interesting spot for that. And obviously, yeah, I mean, everyone remembers 2017, but as you said, he's certainly held his own here. He never really broke through, of course, but it seems like it's just a matter of time.
So I ran 2 separate different stat models for the Masters. One was just the sort of the short-term, long-term stats that I'm looking at, but I also used the fantasynational.com mixed condition model where I took those stats and I weighed them. And I said the past 24 rounds, that gets like a 35% weighting. The past 100 rounds, that gets a 35% rating. But I'm also going to mix in long-term putting on bent grass, long-term putting on fast greens, and strokes gained total at the Masters over the past 6 years. And guess who comes out number 1, Rick?
I think we're going towards Justin Rose. Is that where we're headed here?
We are not. It's actually Dustin Johnson.
Okay.
So
he's
I just think that he's going to come in at like half the ownership of Rory, maybe even less, and that would just put me on him over Rory.
Yeah, it's a super awkward position to kind of echo what Ben was mentioning, where we've talked about sandwich pricing before, and there's so many good guys here, even in like the low 10Ks or other situations. Just it's going to be awkward builds. You're either going to start your lineups with Rory, which leaves DJ out of it, or you'll just drop down and start your lineups before that. So I'm very interested to see, especially as we get closer to Thursday's tee shots, where this ownership goes.
So Ben, DJ rates out number 1 in that mixed condition model. I'll save number 2 because he's a bit down on the list, but number 3 is Justin Rose, the 3rd most expensive player. Obviously, we know he lost in the playoff to Sergio 2 years ago. He comes in with like okay form, not great form, but okay form. Like he was terrible at Career Builder, then all of a sudden he just wins Torrey Pines. And even at the match play, he didn't play all that well, yet he still escaped the group, playing par golf the entire way and watched Gary Woodland implode around him. Then he lost in the round of 16. What do you make of Justin Rose here? Do you just say, screw it, it's the Masters? Justin Rose is still a top player in the world. He's playing good enough that you give him some good vibes at Augusta that he's been used to time over time over time, that he's just going to come out and perform? Because it feels like he's kind of falling under the radar right now, that people want Rory. Maybe they'll go to Dustin, and maybe I'm way off on this, but Rose has the potential to really kind of just fly off the charts. People are willing to give up on Justin Rose very quickly, I've found over the years.
I think there's something to that, and I don't worry about him at all. In a way, I've been encouraged. I feel like he hasn't had his best stuff at the Players even, and then you look and he wasn't a serious threat, but he was up there. He just seems to always hold it together. He's one of the safest options in my mind. I know these are the best players in the world, but I don't see many ways where Rose at least doesn't give you a shot. He may not get it done, but he's just been very consistent. I think everything is trending in the right direction. I have no real red flags about him, going into the week.
Rick, does Rose jump out as someone that you would want to start your lineups with over the top 2? Or if you were going to not take Rory and not take Dustin, would you just go down even lower in the pricing than Rose? And does that make him someone who just may get overlooked, especially like with Tiger lurking right below him?
It's certainly possible with Tiger right there, a few $100 cheaper, but Rose is a really good play here, right? I mean, 8 straight top 25s. And what I like about this is this is essentially like, I'm almost treating this as a no cut event, right? I think there's going to be like 84 players in the field, top 50 in ties. You've got the 10 stroke rule. You've got the losers down at the bottom. Like, there's a really good chance that 75, maybe 80% of the players in this field get through. And if that's the case, we're looking at birdie makers, and few guys make birdies like Justin Rose does. He's got basically a 28% birdie or better, which I believe is second in this field behind only Justin Thomas. So even with, if he goes out and finishes 10th, it's very possible that he's like the 6th or 7th best DraftKings scoring option for this week if he's going to make a ton of birdies along the way.
So for me, where Rory is so expensive, I'm thinking about Dustin, I'm thinking about Justin Rose. Those are the guys that I want. Then Tiger comes in at $10,500. He's playing well. He's not playing great. He's playing well. I just worry that where the state of Tiger's game is, and obviously he's Tiger, he can get it going. He has the great vibes at Augusta. I'd love to see him win the Masters. That's not what I'm saying here. But I don't know if he has enough length off the tee anymore that in optimal conditions, where if it's not going to be super windy or it's not going to be super cold, that these other guys who are around him in the pricing just have a distinct advantage over him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think people, what they need to do, or at least what I've done, is kind of just change. It's not even just expectations, just the notions of what we want with him. I think he's more apt to compete kind of in US Open style conditions where he can lean on, creative experience, just the way he can putt and never seems to implode. If it's a full go, these guys have gears that he just doesn't have. Obviously, he's still very good, but if it's ideal conditions, almost everyone around him, I trust to go way lower, in a given round.
So over the past 24 rounds, he's 6th in par 4 scoring. He's 8th in approach, 7th around the greens. The off the tee hasn't been bad because he's hitting fairways. And like we know at Augusta, Rick, that there's no rough and driving accuracy isn't the biggest thing in the world. Like if you end up in the pine straw, no big deal. As long as there's not a tree in your way, you're probably pretty good to go. But he's rates out in the bottom 20% in this field. And that's including like the Ian Woosnams and the Sandy Lyles of the world in terms of driving distance. Do you think that might be too much to overcome if the winning score is going to be like -14? Like if it's -5, like in the Willett year, or -1 or +1 in the Zach Johnson year, I think that Tiger is very live in one of those situations. But if it becomes a birdie fest, I don't know if I want to use them.
I agree. I think if this is something where we're going to grind out the winner, something like a U.S. Open, as Ben mentioned, he's certainly in play this week. And it's funny you mentioned driving distance, Pat, because I do the regression model every week where we look back at like 12 years of DraftKings scoring, 12 years of PGA stats. And driving distance, it doesn't pop up often, and it popped up here. So driving distance is the #1 stat, or I guess I should say, driving distance is most important at the Masters than any other tournament on the PGA schedule. So driving distance for me is going to be a big one. It doesn't necessarily mean winners, but it means DraftKings scoring. So the fact that there are other guys around him who we'll talk about in a second and who we've already talked about who have that extra gear, have that extra pop, I'm concerned.
So the guy right below him, I think, might be the most interesting name on the board just because of the struggles that he's had recently. He's lost on approach in 2 consecutive events, got bounced in the first round by the Great Dane, the Tiger Slayer, Lucas Bjerregaard. Justin Thomas, he has not been playing well, really, ever since he hurt his wrist at Honda trying to hit the ball from by the tree and smash his club off the tree, hurt his wrist. He just hasn't been the same. Like when we think about Justin Thomas, we think about immaculate ball striking. We think about a guy who's both great off the tee and with approaches. And the fact that his approaches have been sagging, if we look longer term, he's fine. But in the very recent past, he just hasn't been all that good. Even at WGC Mexico, when he turned out a top 10, it was really all a hot putter on Sunday and really good work off the tee. The irons there weren't even all that good. It worries me, but prototypically, I know he doesn't have the best history here, Rick, but what do we do with Justin Thomas? Because right now I'm thinking fade.
Yeah, so I'll actually take the opposite side of this, and I think Justin Thomas is very much the key to winning $1 million this week. If he goes out and wins it, you're probably going to be one of the few people who have him. Like I think he is a very interesting play that swings a lot of lineups, but he's exactly the type of player that we're looking for. I agree. I was watching that shot off the tree live, and I was like, oh God, I hope this doesn't hurt him long term. But he's exactly what we're looking for, right? Like long hitter, birdie maker. This is now his 4th trip to Augusta. His previous 3, he's improved his finishing position each and every time. It just feels like we're culminating towards Justin Thomas really being a significant threat this week. I hope he gets back to, where he's just throwing darts every single shot like we saw at the beginning of the year. But even without his best stuff, he can really contend here.
Ben, what do you make of Justin Thomas? Because I kind of agree with Rick that I don't know if it's necessarily Justin Thomas, but it's this sort of player that gets marginally overlooked that ends up being the key to winning $1 million. Like you won the Thunderdome last year. You won over 100K at the Masters because you had Patrick Reed. He was that guy last year. He was playing well. Coming in, he was fine, but no one wanted to play him. You said, screw it. Patrick Reed is good. I'm going to play him. No one else is. He goes out and wins. You win all the monies. And Justin Thomas is shaping up to be that sort of player this year.
He is. I'll say this, and generally, like when I like to do that, especially in a strong field like this, I like to do it more in the mid-range just because you get a bigger kind of break-even bubble, or, for lack of a better term. Justin Thomas needs to play pretty well. If he doesn't, you're in big trouble. If you have a mid-7s, mid-8 guy, if he makes the cut, which as Rick said, most of these people are going to, and he comes in 20th, it's not a killer. So your margin of error is a little slimmer up here. He's an interesting guy. Obviously, he can get crazy hot with the irons. His around the green has been masking that the irons have cooled off. One of those is going to regress before the other. So it's just a matter of, can he get the approach back dialed in, or is he going to lose the around the green bump? And then he could really have some trouble here.
Yeah, it's especially concerning. Like, you need to be good in all facets. That's one of the best parts about Augusta National, that you need to be good off the tee, you need to be good with approaches, you need to be able to save yourself around the greens, and you don't need to be the world's best putter. Hell, Sergio won here. Patrick Reed has won here, and he gained like 10 strokes putting last year. Paul Casey has a positive putting history at the Masters. So it's more experience on these greens because they're so undulating, they're so fast, that I do think that goes a long way. I think that helps the short game as well. But these greens and regulations, the field only hits around 59-60% of them, which is well below tour average. So if his irons are off, he's going to have to be good around the greens in order to save power, get it up and down to make birdies on these par 5s. That I find that, like, after putting around the green games, there's guys that are great around the green, but that can go either way pretty quickly depending on the layout, depending on the conditions, and where you actually put some of those irons. So not all things are created equally when it comes to that. And then I just kind of scroll down one, and I see Jon Rahm sitting there, Ben. Who do you think is going to be more owned, Jon Rahm or Justin Thomas? Because I think I may have talked myself into Jon Rahm winning.
I think that Jon Rahm's going to be more owned, and I like Jon Rahm better for what it's worth. Here's a guy, I really liked him at the Players. He was there, got to Sunday. I don't know if the moment was too big. He still seems to not be able to get out of his own way in certain spots. But we know, again, Rick pointed out driving this guy, he's not going to have problem getting it out there. He can be really aggressive off the tee, creative around the greens, timely putter, which, again, I don't think is that pertinent, as you said. So I have no problem flat 10K. That changes the uniqueness of your build if you start with a guy like that.
So what are you thinking here, Rick, as it pertains to Jon Rahm? Obviously, in his debut, he finished inside the top 30. He was T4 last year at the Masters, put on a nice show on Sunday. We know that he can go low. He has the driving distance that you talked about. When we look at course history, sometimes you can throw it out, other times you can't. The most correlated course history of any course that the players will have all season long is Augusta National. I like the way that he's trending. I don't love his around the green game as a whole, but he has been in the positives on that. I kind of like the way that he gutted it out at Valspar just a little bit. That's not a course which should typically suit his game. Ended up coming inside the top 10 anyway. And I feel like people don't like Jon Rahm. So even though he might be more owned than Justin Thomas, I don't think he'll be significantly more owned, because you have Rickie Fowler right below him, and you have all those other guys that we've just talked about above him, that he might be the one that people talk up, that, hey, we think that he's a great fit, just he doesn't end up in a lot of people's lineups.
And I think that's reasonable. It's a lot easier to opt for Rickie Fowler or go up and get another one of those 10K guys. And I certainly think Jon Rahm is going to be donning the green jacket at some point in his career. My only concern when we're comparing him against these other 10K guys is kind of a point you made earlier, Pat, where you really need to be a well-rounded player here. Of those $10,000 guys since January 1st, Rahm is last out of them in strokes gained approach, last in around the green when you're comparing him to his 10K peers. So it's not a knock on Jon Rahm, because obviously we're splitting hairs when we're spending $10,000, $10,500, $11,000. But I think there's other options for me. I will not be one of them who's riding Jon Rahm this week.
See, I think I can see myself going Rahm over Thomas. I need to dig in a little bit more on this, but I think the discussion needs to go here. Those are the 6 guys that are above $10,000. So, Ben, if you wanted to put, let's say, you want to do a build where you have Dustin Johnson and Justin Rose as your first 2 players, you're left with an average salary of just around $7,000. Do you think that's a viable way to build a lineup with 2 of these guys in it? Or do you want to take one of them, go to the 9,000s to make sure your bottom end isn't, I mean, it's tough because the $6,000 range isn't full of scrubs. Like, there are guys that are immediate cross-offs. Like I mentioned before earlier, that like you can have Fred Couples, you can have Bernhard Langer, you can have Vijay Singh, but those guys aren't going to win. You're wasting a roster spot if you have one of them on your lineup, only because you can win $1 million with Bernhard Langer in your lineup if he comes like T9. But T9 is the best he's going to come. That is the best possible result that he's going to get. And where you need to have the winner in your lineup to win the $1 million, and you need the guy who comes in second and the guy who comes in third, I feel like those guys are immediate cross-offs because they're not going to win. Therefore, you're wasting a roster spot for win equity, and that's just a situation that you don't want to be in. I feel like those lineups are dead, even though they're not. Like we talked about at the match play, there are optimal ways to build your lineup. I think the optimal way to build your lineup at the Masters is to not have those types of players. Now, there are guys in the $6,000 range and right around the low 7s that you can make this work with. Is it something that you'll do, Rasa?
Probably not, to be honest. You can make it work, and yes, there's some viable plays. To me, though, the window of what you're doing if you do that is saying, I think it's going to be DJ first and Rose second, so I need them both. Even if one of them wins and the other plays well, there's going to be other types of builds if you're in a tournament with 100,000 people that you can get away with not having them both. So just on, I obviously haven't built yet. I'm more apt to just take one of them and then really take 5 other guys that, of course, you can't get everyone up there, but guys who I think the range of outcomes is significantly higher than some of the 6K guys.
What do you make of it, Rick? What do you think the optimal lineup construction is going to be this week? And do you agree that having some of these old guys or the amateurs, well, it might be fun to have them and they are cost effective, that they're not the best way to construct your lineups?
Yeah, I don't think they are. And to Ben's point, you need to actually kind of think about what could potentially happen here. If you do opt for something like, okay, DJ Rose or DJ Rahm, you give yourself very little outs. You need a very specific scenario to happen that Ben was alluding to. I think what we usually see in majors is a much more balanced approach. If you would have told me that I had $7,500 left for those roster spots, for the remaining 4 of my roster spots, I would have been more interested. You would have had to stack up on 2 studs. You would have had to take basically Kevin Kisner down there at $6,800. You just would have had so few outs if any single thing goes wrong. So what I think, whether it's optimal or not, I think a lot of owners are going to take a very balanced build. I might try to deviate a little bit away from that, because now that we've had a bunch of majors over the course of the last few years, everyone is getting on this balanced approach. I might try to take 2 guys in the upper 9s or 2 guys in the low 10,000 range. Maybe not being as extreme as others, but trying to deviate a little bit from a strictly, $8,500 every player approach.
And going back to you with this, Rick, of the top 6 guys, who are the cross-offs for you that aren't going to make your player pool? Right now, I'm looking at it. I'm not going to play Tiger. I'm thinking about not playing Justin Thomas, and I may have to make a hard stand and not play Rory McIlroy solely because I'm not going to play 150 lineups. I might play 20 in the Millionaire Maker.
Yeah, so for me, I'm crossing out Rahm with the approaches in the around the green game, and I think I'd prefer to either just pay up for Justin Thomas. Tiger is a guy I rarely roster anyway because he's always overpriced, he's always overvalued. I would die if he wins this week. I'll love it, but he's not going to be in my DraftKings lineup. And then because I am so into Rory, I'm willing to pay the extra $300. So I don't think DJ is going to make it either. They're all out for me.
What do you make of it, Ben? How do you think you're going to condense your core here at the top?
For me, obviously, we're going to take some secondary factors with some of these guys, but the 3 guys that I know that I will have are going to be Rory, Rose, and Rahm. You got JT, Tiger, and DJ. There's certain things that I'm going to look for, and if it seems like it's breaking their way with ownership or weather, might bump them up, but for me, Rory, Rose, and Rahm are my three favorite.
If it does get windy, and I looked at a very preliminary weather report on this, we're a week away, and it does look like there's extreme wind on Thursday and Friday, like 30, 35 mile per hour gusts, 28 mile per hour consistently. That would be very reminiscent of the Danny Willett year when Spieth was up by a bunch and ended up gagging it, and we won all the monies, and it was fantastic. But I would trust DJ the most of all these guys if the weather was crappy.
If it's real bad, to me, it would hurt Rory the most. And I would bump guys like DJ Rose, no matter what I'm going to like. But for me, Rory is the one where I want ideal scoring conditions because I think that's where he's best suited.
What do you think, Rick? Do you think that weather impacts Rory more than these other guys? Because I think it would impact Rory and Rahm the most.
I tend to agree with that, which is kind of different than what you see on like PGA Twitter, where it's like, oh, weather's bad, grab all the Euros, right? But that's not necessarily the case. DJ with his ball flight and what he's able to do translates in literally any weather condition. So I do agree when it's, and I think we've talked about this before with the three of us, is like when it's ideal conditions and everyone's playing their best, like Rory might be the best player in the world. But when it's not ideal, there's other options. And I think DJ would be the guy, and Rose, I feel like Rose is a machine at this point. He can do anything in any weather conditions. I think Rory takes a pretty big hit.
9K range. It kicks off with Rickie Fowler, who is always going to be popular, comes in with good form, already has a win this year too. Rick, do you ever look back at like, there's Masters trends like, oh, X amount of the last 25 winners have a win in the season leading up to the Masters? Does that factor in for you at all, or do you just look at good play overall?
Hard no. I'm so anti-trends, right? A lot of it is pretty noisy. You'll find people who are just out there looking for trends, right? Like, oh, what has happened previously? Very little of it is predictive. So for me, I don't really care about the trends or historics of a tournament. I'm looking more at, hey, where do these guys stand? Does this course fit them? Are they playing well? Things like that.
Ben, I mean, obviously you don't, because you took Patrick Reed last year, who basically smashed all those trends just with a giant mallet. And
That's right.
He did not fit any trend coming in, yet he ended up winning. So I'm guessing you don't look at them either.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think that Rick said it best. They're not predictive, and you can make any type of trend fit what you want to do, and vice versa. So I don't look at that stuff at all. It is interesting. I do enjoy reading it, but certainly not something I base my lineups off of.
So what do we do with Rickie Fowler here? We know he's going to be popular. We're filming this before the conclusion of Valera, but let's say he wins or comes inside the top 5. He's only going to be even more popular at that point. And listen, he has a fantastic Masters record. He's an excellent player. He probably, if Reed wasn't so hot last year, he should have won the green jacket. He played better at Augusta than like the past like 6 winners had, outside of like that crazy Spieth 19 under year. So we know he's familiar with this course. We know he's good at this course, and we know that he comes in kind of hot fire right now. Even skipped the match play, so it didn't throw his rhythm out of whack. That I still don't know what I want to do with Rickie, because I can't just own all of the most popular players in the field, Ben, can I?
No, that would be nice if you could. Rickie's dialed in. There's no doubt. I think he knows what he's doing. Last year he did not lose. Reed just won. There's no doubt about that. So my plan, and obviously I have not built yet, is to hopefully be able to get Rickie as my second man in on some of these teams, so I can get the ownership with starting with him on some and then using him as a second man in, because I do really like him, but obviously there's not a ton of room when you like all these guys up here.
Rick, if you start with Rory and Fowler, you have $7,100 left for the rest of your lineups. I think that's going to be a very popular start to lineups this week.
Yeah, we're getting closer. When you've got low 7,000s left, you can make some pretty intriguing lineups with guys that we've seen over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I don't find myself playing Fowler a lot. It's kind of similar to Tiger, where he's always more popular than he should be, even if he's in a good spot. I don't think people realize how I don't want to say inconsistent he is, but inconsistent. He's very, very volatile. He only gains strokes tee to green 59% of his rounds. That's the worst number from anyone in his salary, all the way down to Louis Oosthuizen's salary. To put that into perspective, Tommy Fleetwood does it 82% of the time. So his stats look good. He's going to be a very, very volatile option. And because of that and how popular he always is, he's almost a natural fade for me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to fade Rickie too, and a lot of it has to do, you talked about where Rahm can rate out well at the very, very top end in some of the stats. Rickie off the tee, and even around the green right now, like he's been being carried by a pretty hot putter so far this season. And listen, he rode a hot putter to a second place finish last season, so it's not that it can't happen. I just don't like banking on those things. So probably a fade for Fowler on me, just based on the form coming in, where he's outperforming maybe what his baseline should be at this moment, and the fact that he's going to be incredibly popular. That I think that's a very logical fade for me. What do you think, Ben?
It's tough. There's a couple guys, and Rickie's one of them for me, where I have a tough time, conceptually grasping how good they are because they do it differently. Like Rickie is one of the best putters in the world. So naturally his tee to green game is going to be masked because he's just going to make more putts than these other guys. That makes it tough to really know where he rates. I think I'm a little higher on him than you guys. But again, this is when you have massive ownership coming in and you have so many other pivots, it's certainly tough to just try to say, I'm going to hitch my wagons to Rickie when I have three other guys that may be a third or a fourth of the ownership.
And all the other guys in the $9,000 area are just not going to be as popular. Brooks Koepka is up next at $9,500. He comes in with terrible form. Came second at Honda, was crappy at Arnold Palmer. He was crappy at the Players, wasn't very good at the match play. He lost that weight. Now he's putting it back on. However, the guy wins majors. He hasn't won the Masters as of yet. And frankly, over the years, when I rated out the mixed condition model, that he didn't rate out so highly because he has gotten better at the Masters year after year after year, 33rd, 21st, 11th. Is he just a big game hunter, Ben? Like, are you going to use Brooks? Because I'm really torn on it. And I know that Tim Anderkus has picked him to win. So that in one hand worries me, but he's been picking a lot of winners at these really high-end events.
Oh, reverse curse. Brooks is very difficult for me. If he would have shown me, and I don't like to base things off one, especially the match play. I was really disappointed that he didn't even get anything going there. That was a hesitation because now I'm just wondering where he's actually at. So for me, sadly, I'm not sure that Brooks is going to make it in terms of the player pool. There's something to his ability, in these ridiculously strong and important tournaments. But I also think there's part of that's just running good at the right time. I don't think it's that different in terms of, a totally different gene or gear for him. So I'm not really on him. Obviously can get it going. We've seen that, but not for me this week.
If driving distance plays a big key here, Rick, like you mentioned, obviously Brooks should be on your radar, but is that enough to push him through despite the bad form?
It's not. Unfortunately, this $9,000 range that these guys are in is critically important. It's we talked about who you're going to pick out of the 10Ks. This is the logical next place to go where you can find leverage on the field. Brooks would certainly be leverage on the field, but I agree with Ben, and I hate to do the eye test stuff. We're usually much more data driven here, but like he had no cojones at the match play, man. It was so weak and lame. I don't know if he can actually just flip a switch and say, okay, now it's the Masters. Now I'm going to be one of the best players in the world. I'm not sure that something like that exists. So I'll probably opt for even someone who's like a super nerd, like Bryson right below him, who's probably already at Augusta and has been there for 6 weeks, staying at the whatever amateurs cabin. That's someone who I'd prefer to spend up on. Brooks he doesn't do it for me.
Well, Bryson's next at $9,300. And if we're going to talk about Brooks Koepka coming in with bad form, Bryson has awful form, especially with the iron. Something about the elevation in Mexico, it's like someone took a piece of sand and threw it into a computer and it blew out the circuit board because he just has not been right since. But I went back and I looked at some of the strokes gained data from the Masters last year. Did you know that Bryson lost almost 6 strokes on the greens a year ago? Still made the cut and was one of the best players off the tee. I think that goes a long way because we all kind of liked Bryson last year. And I know a lot of people jumped on him at 80-1 bets back right when he was going through his hot streak. But the guy has 5 wins over the past 2 years. I know the form isn't there right now, but I'm kind of leaning Bryson as well. But nothing logically would dictate that he should do well here, Rick.
I tend to agree. I mean, he finished 20th at the Players, so it is coming back around a little bit. His strokes gained putting numbers are significantly better this year than what you described they were to be last year. And one of these situations where every time you play Augusta National, it's better and better, right? We see a lot of guys who consistently improve their finishing position, and we talk about how important experience is. So it's very interesting. I think that you don't have to own a lot of Koepka specifically, but even and then Bryson or other guys in this range to have leverage on the rest of the field because Rickie's in the same spot. So I think you have to take some chances because if his form was what we would want it to be, he'd be 10,500 with some of these other guys.
You in or out on Bryson, Ben, the scientist, the mad scientist? Is he gonna elevate us to a Masters win?
I was on him last year. I think I'm going to continue to buy him at this type of course. There's something with Augusta, with all the slopes, with all the stuff. I think that fits into, just the way he likes to kind of conceptually break things down. I'm worried about the form too, but at the same time, as Rick kind of just alluded to, if you changed a couple of these finishes in terms of when they happened, he would be more popular and a higher price. So I know the game is in there. It's just about correcting it. I do worry just on a macro level with Bryson that when he gets off the tracks, the way he goes about things, it's very difficult to adjust mid-round and adjust and right the ship like some of the other top players. But other than that, I still think he's worth some stabs this week.
Yeah, especially in something like the Millionaire Maker, where it seems like his upside is winning potential. But of all these guys, except for maybe Rahm, that they do have that blow up potential that if it starts going bad, it gets bad very, very quickly. And then you have the guy who's right below him. It's Tommy Fleetwood, who's going to be exceptionally popular because Tommy is always popular. He followed up his missed cut in his first appearance at the Masters, the T17 last year, and comes in super hot fire. He hasn't lost strokes tee to green in any event since last year's Wells Fargo. He has a fifth. He has a third in his last two starts in stroke play, obviously not match play. So Ben, do you eat the chalk with Tommy? The price is good. The odds are good. The form is good. It seems like he's a guy who can break through here, but almost like we mentioned with like Tiger's game, I think I like Tommy at like British Opens and US Opens better.
I have no problem playing Fleetwood. I might play him in cash and kind of hedge it like that. I just think that if you're talking about high variance tournaments, I'll let other people, I'm not saying I'm all out fading him, but I think there's other plays here, and I'm not sure how high the ceiling is. Of course, he's a very good player, and he can get hot, but I think he's more just a guy that he's going to do his thing. I wouldn't be surprised for him to kind of have another finish, in the teens, nothing major, not really contend, not kill you. But I'm kind of looking for a couple different pivots in this range. So if he's massively popular, I don't think I'm going to be able to get overweight. I'll have exposure, but I don't think I'll have leverage.
What do you think about Tommy, Rick? Do you think that he is the chalk you want to eat, or is there someone else in the 9K range that you would rather pivot to, or another high price player that you're like, I have more confidence in that guy?
No, I think Tommy's the chalk for good reason, right? I mean, he's only $9,200. He does everything well. He's got the around the green game that we would like. I think Ben is absolutely on the right track. Where for good or bad, his outcomes are a little bit limited. His range of outcomes might be like 5th to 25th, something like that is probably his normal distribution. But he's one of these guys where, if this is a lower scoring Masters, I'd like him a lot more, whether it's via conditions and whatnot, because he just doesn't make a lot of birdies or as many birdies as these other guys over the course of a season. We've seen him get hot, shoot like a 62 in a round, and they come in bunches. But over the course of the entire season, he doesn't make nearly as many birdies as some of his peers here. So I'd prefer to keep this, if it was a single digit winning score, I think he's much more in play.
Yeah, so I guess keep track of the conditions with that, because if we go right below him, Jason Day is right there. And of all the guys we talked about, the people might not be on Brooks, people might not be on Bryson, people are not going to be on Jason Day, Rick.
Absolutely right. This is your pivot. This is your leverage point. If you kind of look at even just Day to Fleetwood, very similar off the tee. Tommy's a little bit better in approaches. Jason Day's one of the most elite putters in the field, and two missed cuts in his last 3 starts is going to drive his ownership down, especially with the always lingering back issues, right? Like, it's just when he withdrew from whatever that was a few weeks ago, it was almost like I was seeing all these tweets, hey, Jason Day, never again, we're going to write him off, and which is such a silly route to take, because if he's teeing it up, he's most certainly going to play 4 rounds almost every single time. He's got that elite history. He's the exact type of player we would want here. So
he has actually gained off the tee in 5 consecutive events. You talk about the putting has been immaculate. He's actually been one of the worst players in the field around the green over the past 24 rounds, which absolutely blows my mind, because he is one of the best short game players on tour.
Right. So, long term, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but I imagine if we can get him back towards, what his career or his last 365 days of around the green numbers are, there's probably a few strokes he can make up there. And you're absolutely right. Like, if you put a wedge in this guy's hand, I'd choose him in a chipping contest almost every time.
So Ben, over his last 5 tournaments, he's actually losing 0.3 strokes per event around the greens. But if you go back to his past 100 tournaments, he's actually gaining a stroke, 1.2 strokes around the green over that time. In fact, across the board, he's positive in all strokes gained categories over his past 100 tournaments. Are you willing to buy into this very short term kind of lack of touch around the greens with Jason Day, or the longer term model that does open up, like Rick mentioned, a very good leverage play in this 9K range? Like, Day might come in at 5% ownership.
Yeah, I like Day in this spot. I don't know why. I hope it's just an anomaly with his around the green. He's an incredible, I think he's the best around the green player in the world, to be honest. So I don't know exactly what's going on. We know he can get hot with the putter. People are just, and this is the thing, it gets tricky when you start reading into how people view golfers. But there is something to be said about a guy who's been burning people. He was not good at the match play. He's withdrawn. It's always with the back. And the Players was a similar situation. And I think he was like 3% owned, and he came out and he played well. So there's no doubt in my mind that Jason Day is live to compete here. You're getting a really interesting pivot. 9,100, obviously he's not going to be, unless you're going super balanced, he's not going to be your first man in. I'm intrigued, especially if he's only like 5%.
If you are going to do one of those balanced approaches where even if you start with, let's say, Rickie Fowler as your team captain and work down from there, or if you go with Rory and we expect Rory to be super highly owned, is Jason Day a very logical next man in just to break up your lineup a little bit so you don't get duplicated?
For sure. We talk about this a lot on these shows about you don't need to be unique in 6 spots. You need to be unique with your 6 golfers total. So if you have a really, popular combo in terms of the value plays, maybe you want to change it up with Jason Day up top. If you've already made your stand down low, you could pick whoever you want up top, and you're probably going to be all right in terms of uniqueness.
So, Rick, you talk about Tommy Fleetwood, probably good chalk. The last guy in the $9,000 range, coming off a win at Valspar, advanced from his group at the match play after burning everyone at the Players' Championship, myself included. Paul Casey, great course history. When I referred to my mixed condition model that put in the putting, that put in the course history, and the recent and long-term form of the key stats, it was DJ number 1, Paul Casey number 2. Wiley was on the show on Thursday. He mentioned that he's picking Paul Casey to win. Where do you expect Paul Casey's ownership to come in at? Over, under 20%?
Oh, I think under, just because of Fleetwood's here. Bubba is in the low range below him. And I don't know what I guess we're gonna have to talk about it in a second, but I don't know what we're going to do with Jordan Spieth and with the influx of, new players. Are they just going to roster Spieth? So I think there's a way that Paul Casey comes in here under 20%. The only knock is he can't putt. And we've seen that that tends to be okay. He's got great course history here. Otherwise, his game is in great shape. He's tee to green. He's awesome. Fire him up and hope everybody goes and rosters Bubba and Spieth around him.
So if you had to pick one of the chalk, would it be Fleetwood or would it be Casey?
For me, it's Fleetwood, just because of how hot he can get, right? And I think he can go out and get you that like round of the day type and the birdie streak bonuses. He's just someone who I think has more chops, so to speak, which doesn't sound like it should be because Casey's a seasoned vet and he's got more wins than Fleetwood does. I just much prefer Fleetwood's game and DraftKings scoring style than I do Paul Casey's.
Paul Casey last year, Ben, 4th in the field in strokes gained putting at the 2018 Masters. If you had to pick one, would it be Fleetwood or would it be Casey?
It would be Fleetwood. Casey's another guy that I think is one of the safer options. I expect him to play well and do his thing, similar to what we've seen. And that's not, like I said, it's not going to hurt you in tournaments by any stretch. But I do think that Fleetwood, if I'm looking for a guy to maybe, hit that ceiling a little more often, I'm going to roll with Tommy.
Do you think that there's a situation where you end up using them both?
If I make a team where I really get aggressive down at the bottom and I just want my top end guys to, not that I don't want them to win, but if I'm just like, all right, just give me 2 guys that are in, fringe 10, a top 10, I'll let some of these wild cards that I like down low, possibly one of them break through, then there's absolutely a possibility.
Would you ever consider starting your team Fowler, Fleetwood, and Casey? Because I don't think a lot of people are going to do that. And if there are going to be 3 really highly owned guys, actually putting them all together might be unique enough that you squeeze that through. And if you do that, Rick, you end up with $7,400 remaining for your next 3 players.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's in that $7,500 range, there's like 3, 4, 5 guys that are going to be super popular and in everybody's lineup. So I think you'd end up with either a very chalky but potentially unique lineup, if that makes sense, just because of, individually each one of those players is going to be highly owned, but altogether might not be as commonly duplicated. So it would be something interesting to consider, but you're going to have to consider it if you're rostering those guys because of what their individual ownership is going to be.
We're going to come back with the $8,000 range and really hammer home. Do we want Bubba? Do we want Spieth? Or maybe a Francesco Molinari in that range? But first, we're going to talk about some of the sleepers that you should be looking at for the 2019 Masters. In a world with so much media discussion about every event, the term sleeper is antiquated since most people are aware of everyone in the Masters. But it still carries a ton of SEO value, so I'm sticking with it because I want them clicks. I'm also sticking with Patrick Cantlay. We know he's good, but in the area surrounded by Matt Kuchar, Mark Leishman, Patrick Reed, and other viable options, Cantlay's just going to get overlooked, which would be a mistake. Although he missed the cut a year ago in his first start since amateur status in 2012, Cantlay has been sneaky consistent all year. He comes to Augusta with top 15 finishes in 6 of his past 8 events, ranks top 10 in the field in driving distance gained with positive approach numbers in 7 of his past 8. And the last time we saw him play a stroke event, he burned 18% of DraftKings players by missing the cut at the Players. That's going to sour him in a lot of people's minds. Don't be one of those people. Play Patrick Cantlay. Reed, who do you got flying under the radar?
Favorite sleeper this week is going to be Gary Woodland at 7,500. I don't know how much of a sleeper he is in terms of name value, but just look at where he's positioned in salary. He's right by Poulter, RBC, Stenson, who are going to garner a lot of ownership or more ownership to spread out over this price range. And I think Gary Woodland comes in low owned. He's elite with ball striking in the last 50 or 24 rounds, where you're looking long or short term. He's ranking elite. He ranks great in par 4 scoring over the last 24 rounds in the top 20. Again, he doesn't do well here, or hasn't done well in the past, missing 3 out of 4 cuts in that 2014 where he had his best and only finish at Augusta. But if he can get his putter going and not lose those couple of strokes like he usually does, I think he's going to return great value.
Davis?
Keith Mitchell, he's at a very appropriate price tag. He is below $7,000 on DraftKings. He's actually $6,800. He is 9th on tour in strokes gained off the tee. He is actually 23rd on tour in strokes gained tee to green and 45th in strokes gained total. The research that Data Golf has done shows that strokes gained tee to green is going to be the stat that most over-indexes in terms of course history at Augusta. And when you think about how long some of the holes are and how many tricky long shots that these guys have to make, Mitchell's game definitely does make sense. He's also a winner on the PGA Tour this year, something that I like my guys to have just to show that they have the ability to persevere. And in terms of guys under 7,000, I want my guys to be able to do some DraftKings scoring as well, get some birdies and get some eagles. So even if they finish T28, they're still able to get me some DraftKings points to help my lineups, and Keith Mitchell is definitely able to do that with his game off of the tee.
Drew, who's your sleeper?
Mr. Charlie Hoffman, 6.8K. Love some Charlie Hoffman this week. He's had some really good rounds at Augusta. Coming in, the form isn't really there, so we'll see if his ownership can stay low. But man, I like some Charlie Hoffman this week.
Jeff?
Big money Matt Wallace, 4-time winner on the European Tour over the last year and a half. Yeah, this guy comes to play. I mean, he's seriously had some big-time chase him down wins in the past. And this is a player who made a charge to make the Ryder Cup team last. Now, he didn't make it because I don't know why. It didn't get picked, I guess. I mean, 4 wins in a year and a half isn't good enough. But this is a player who's shown some real class in the European Tour, and he's shown some class this year on the PGA Tour as well. He made a successful transition. Made the cut in all 3 events on the Florida Swing, T6 at the Arnold Palmer, T20 at the Honda Classic. These are some tough courses we're talking about. And he's shown a really, really good short game as well, which I like coming into Augusta. First in scrambling at the Players. Matt Wallace, yeah, it's his first time playing. I don't think many people are going to play him. I think they're going to get scared, but I'm not scared. It's a guy who's done everything well over the last year and a half. He's coming up in the world rankings, wants to make a name for himself. I think he makes for a terrific sleeper play at 7,100. It's going to be all a big money Matt.
Let's dig into the $8,000 range for the DraftKings Millionaire Maker, starting at the very top, and two of the names are going to be some of the most contentious. We got to battle this one out. Number one, at $8,900, Jordan Spieth. $8,800, Bubba Watson. Then you got Hideki, Francesco Molinari, Xander, Adam Scott, Phil Mickelson, Tony Finau, Louis Oosthuizen, and the defending champion, Patrick Reed, comes in at $8,000. I guess the big topic that we need to get into, Rick, with this is Jordan Spieth. Do you bank on the course history of Jordan Spieth, or do you ride the recent form of Jordan Spieth? And is it going to matter to most people? Are they just going to play Jordan Spieth anyway? Because I once saw a Bart Simpson chalkboard that said, do not fade Spieth at the Masters. Never came worse than 11th.
I hate Jordan Spieth. This is such a unique situation where this guy has such immaculate, obviously, course history, and he's got the name value. And I feel like we've been trending to the point where it's like, well, I'm just going to wait for Spieth and fire him up at the Masters, but it's not going to fool me. Just in general, I prefer recent form over course history. I don't really think that when you show up on a specific in a specific locker room, your game turns around all of a sudden. And Spieth has been so bad tee to green this year that I mean he's six. There's only six players worse in the field tee to green. They're Mike Weir, Michael Kim, Kadira, Couples, Schwartzel, and Sink. Like that is literally the stat set of players that he's in right now. I'm not just going to assume because he steps on the grounds of Augusta National he's going to turn into a world class player.
Hasn't finished better than 35th in like 8 months, Ben, but for whatever reason, I think I'm going to play him.
Oh, I don't want to, base too much on Valero, but this is one guy where I'm going to determine a lot of what I do based off that tournament, because he has a problem right now off the tee where if it's not, if he goes out there and Valero's punishing, off the tee and just loses 4 or 5 strokes, I can't play him. I don't care how good the course and how good you're here. If you can't hit it off the tee even remotely consistently, I don't know how I get there. If he somehow turns, I'm not going to say, one tournament's going to change it all, but I'd be a little more apt to take some flyers on it. I just worry about how much I'm going to need for leverage. That's the other problem. People are going to play him just on course history regardless. And that is scary to me.
What do you think that his final ownership number comes in at the Millionaire Maker, Ben? Because I'm thinking 8%, or am I just thinking that's fool's gold? Because if it was 8%, if I play 20 lineups, I'd use him in 2. That's the way that I would approach Jordan Spieth. But is he going to breach like double-digit ownership?
I was, before you said your number, I was going to say 10%. So I'm kind of in that same ballpark. I don't see him unless, if he comes in the top 5 at Valero, that will change things, as silly as it may be. But I'm not sold on Spieth garnering a ton of ownership just because it's not like he's playing poorly. He's playing, as Rick just talked about, as one of the poorest right now in this field, which is really saying something.
The only thing that he rates out inside the top 10 in my key stats that I'm looking at is approaches in proximity from 150 to 175 yards. But unfortunately, it's going to be tough if you're in the trees off every single tee. We even saw it last year. He came third and hit it 100 yards on the 72nd hole off the tee. But Rick, let's say he has a mediocre or he misses the cut finish at Valero. What do you think the ownership comes in at? Because everyone can't own Fleetwood, Fowler, Bubba, and Paul Casey, yet still have double digits on Jordan Spieth.
Yeah, so I have this problem where I give the general public way too much credit, and I assume that they're going to do things properly and they're going to make match play lineups where they don't have 2 guys in the same pod, and then everyone makes me look like a fool because they're fools. So I'm now going to assume, guilty until proven innocent. The general public is very, very dumb. And when these new players come in, there's going to be a lot of Jordan Spieth. So I think it's going to be over 10%. I think it's going to fall between 10 and 15% where you're just going to plug and play. Whoa, $8,900. I know this guy's name. I know that he's, got this elite history here. I'm going to roster him. I'm not going to miss out when he wins it again. So for me, I think he's going to be a little bit higher owned. And then I don't know what he is this week at Valero, but tack a couple more percentage onto that, right? No matter what he does.
In the big $5 GPP at Valero, he was around 11% ownership, but there were guys around him who were pretty highly owned, but he was kind of even with them. And then you had your Finaus and your Fowlers that were much higher owned. Yeah. Then you had your Coke Racks of the world that people were all about, and Billy Horschel. But If we go $100 cheaper and Bubba Watson sitting right there, number one in driving distance over the past 24 rounds, we know he's won here twice. This course is set up for him. What would be the case against Bubba, Rick?
I guess ownership, right? I mean, there's really not, and I'm pretty good at making a case against Bubba. But if you're going to roster Bubba, this is most certainly the place, right? We've seen him win. He's got all the metrics. He's playing well. Like this, there really is no argument other than he might be very popular as a past champion, and he's only $8,800. I don't think there's a real reason to avoid him otherwise.
You in or out, Ben?
Kind of indifferent, to be honest. My argument against Bubba would be if we get unique conditions. I don't know. He gets frustrated easily. Sometimes we see him kind of beat himself. But if it's kind of set up for him, it's a scary fate. I'll tell you that much. I'm not a big Bubba guy in general, but there's no doubt we've all seen that he likes certain courses and he is able to repeat at the same course over and over.
Yeah, I mean, I've been dubbed the Bubba Whisperer from time to time, and I'm with you. I think that outside of Rory, and maybe even more than Rory, and maybe even Rahm, I've seen Rahm gritted out at some tougher courses and bad conditions that if it does pick up with wind, I think Bubba's screwed.
Yep, I agree.
And I don't know if people will play that narrative if we get a weather report and it's going to be super windy. Rick, do you think that would actually put a significant amount of people on them, or are people just dialed in that, hey, Bubba's playing well coming in. He's gaining a ton of strokes off the tee. The putter, this new putting grip, it looks fine. He's in his happy place. He has a chance at winning. I'm going to play him anyway.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people make wholesale changes, whether it's last minute or whether it's on some of these outside factors. I think they'll just ride or die with whoever is in their lineups. And yeah, I agree. You want optimal conditions if you're rostering Bubba.
So those are the two names that I think garner the most attention. Hideki is right below Bubba Watson as well. Then you have the whole slew of the $8,000 range. Rick, who else pops out to you? Because I actually might just go with Hideki. Hideki and Finau are the two that I'm really considering.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of not hoping because I'd lose a lot of money, but I wouldn't be too worried if Finau missed the cut this week and drives him down a little bit, because I'd be firing him up next week. Hideki compared to Bubba kind of laps him in a lot of different categories. They're both terrible putters, so you'll get him at a premium. But the guy that I really like here is Xander. He's 10th in strokes gained tee to green since the start of the year, but he's priced as golfer number 17. Gains in all aspects in a huge percentage of his rounds. Outside of the missed cut at the Masters, which is something that we generally write off. This is now his second trip to Augusta, and he's seen it another time. I think he's in a pretty good spot here.
Yeah, what do you make of Xander, Ben? Because he has gained strokes ball striking in 3 consecutive events. It's just been the around the green game and the putting that's really let him down. That I'm indifferent to him in one way, because I know he's going to be lower owned, so I see him as a leverage play, and I think that he's a good leverage play. But I don't know if I can talk myself into him really having an elite finish here. Everyone was on him at the Players, and what did he do with the Players? He missed the cut.
Yeah, finally. I'm never on Xander, and he is a damn good player. For me, it's just, an opportunity cost. I like Decky more. I like Adam Scott more. Dare I say a little oosty in my life, as I always do, which never ends well. There are just guys that, for me, this is probably a range where I don't see a ton of safety across the board. So I'm going to embrace it, and I'm just going to look for a couple wild men. If I get clipped with a miscut, I'll have to deal with it. But all in all, I think I'm really shooting for kind of like Patrick Reed last year. These are the kind of guys, dark horses, that I think could really contend.
Well, Reed is in this area, Phil is in this area, and Francesco Molinari is in this area. Is there a chance that Francesco just isn't owned? Which kind of seems crazy, but he has a bad course history, although he was pretty good last year, but he just seems like a different player now.
Yeah, I agree with that. He is just dealing. I'm probably not going to play him, so I guess that's one strike against. Maybe other people are thinking on my wavelength. I don't really see it. I know he really has. I don't want to say turned a corner, because he's not a young guy, but he's playing phenomenally. Again, opportunity cost. I just like Decky so much more.
Well, it's funny, Rick, when you look at his recent results, and as it pertains to Francesco, he's playing a lot better on longer courses than he is on shorter courses, which makes absolutely no sense. Right. Although the driving distance has gotten a little bit better over the years, but you would just think with his style of play, but it's these long irons. They're great, and all of a sudden he learned how to putt. That I actually think that the API is a place where you can kind of look at and say, you know what? If a shorter hitter can play well there, they can play well here too. Or am I just overreaching on this?
No, I think you're onto something, but the math on Molinari doesn't add up. Like he shouldn't be this good or this good in certain aspects, or like he did just kind of flip a switch and his entire game changed. Despite getting a little bit longer, he's still one of the shorter players in the field, or at least of the guys in this range, which is a big concern because we know how important driving distance is going to be. And I think what we kind of alluded to earlier, where he has few outs. When you don't hit it as far and you have to win in one specific way, if that one specific way, like your long irons, does not work out, you have no other outs. So you really have a very specific situation. You're banking on Molinari to be super elite at this one aspect. And if not, you're kind of in trouble. So that is a bit concerning to me. I prefer to play guys that give me multiple outs.
Yeah, see, I think Hideki is my favorite play in this range, then Finau. I think those would be the two. I'm considering Molinari. I'm going to consider Xander for a lot of the reasons that you brought up. I didn't even realize he had been as good tee to green like that. And I always like to look at the Tournament of Champions and John Deere as two weirdly correlated courses. I think Riviera has the most in common with Augusta. When you just look back at the past winners, there's been a lot of crossover success. Hell, even Mike Weir has won at both, and that's just shocking. It does set up for left-handers, both these courses, so that is something. And Tournament of Champions and John Deere just have really slanted fairways that it's a situation where you don't see these unique lies over and over and over. And I'm not saying like play Michael Kim because he won the John Deere Classic, but Molinari is someone who's played well at the John Deere in the past. Jordan Spieth has won both of those tournaments too. Do you think there's anything to that where you just see so many unique lies at Augusta that the more experience that you have with them, maybe that does help you out here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned it where there's only a few times a year where like every shot you hit in the fairway is the ball's, a few inches below your feet or a few inches above your feet. Some guys are just naturally better at that. It's kind of, there was an interview, Spieth actually alluded to this a few years ago, where he said when he was growing up, he did not go to the driving range that much. He just played a lot of golf. And he said, I went and I had balls above my feet and I had below. And he thought that really translated to Augusta National. So I think there is certainly something to it than just constantly being on flat surfaces at the range or some of these tournaments that they play. And some of the results have bared it out to what you were just mentioning, Pat.
I want to throw some cold water on Louis, Ben. Just the guy can't hit an iron to save his life. He's making putts from every time. It's like, let's cut to Louis Oosthuizen, who's making an 80-foot putt. Like, eventually that has to catch up to him.
Well, there's definitely truth to that. Yeah, between the around the green and the putting, it was something. But Louis is just one of these guys that I if he's not going to be popular, and I guess maybe showing some signs of life will boost him a bit. This guy, I mean, he's been second in all of the, obviously he's won a major before, but he has come in second in all the majors. He is a big game guy, not going to be intimidated. Certainly a miscut. We talked about how easy it is to make this cut. Louis is always extreme risks. He's no matter what, he's extreme risks in the non-cuts and the WGCs, just the way he gets going. But I don't mind him just because I think he always has that sky-high ceiling, and I'll embrace that if I can get over with 10%.
If you had to pick one of the former champions that's in the 8K range, you got Scott, you got Phil, you got Patrick Reed. They're all there, 84, 83, $8,000. You said you like Adam Scott. Why him over the other two?
Well, first of all, it's process of elimination. Patrick Reed really seems to be struggling, and Scott, with this putting, it's kind of showing some signs. Obviously, we know he's always been a world-class ball striker, and if he can just not lose the 4 or 5 strokes putting, which he has not lately, it's been really solid. He can lean, off the tee, hit the irons, and scrambling's never going to be great for a guy like that. But he hits so many greens, I'm not sure he can mitigate that to the best of his abilities, even at a tough place like Augusta.
Scott's gained strokes putting in 6 consecutive events, Rick. Do you like him better than the Phils and the Reeds of the world? Because for whatever reason, I'm really digging this new Phil who's like really embracing his like assholeness. It's really fantastic to me. And I think this might be his last viable shot at winning this tournament.
Yeah, Instagram Phil is pretty awesome. On course Phil, kind of mediocre at the moment. But I do lean on Adam Scott, who I think he's certainly playing the best, right? 12th place at the Players, and what you find when guys haven't played for a while is they're a little bit forgotten, right? Did not tee it up at the match play, didn't play, comes in here with a skill set that we know can translate, right? He's put on the green jacket before, 12th at the Players. So like this is a spot where I think Ben's point of process of elimination between those three guys absolutely points to Adam Scott. But even if you compare him to the rest of the range, I think he goes pretty overlooked here.
Yeah, I think Phil will be the one that does go overlook along with Patrick Reed, and I'm going to side with Phil. I think those calves are really going to get a solid workout here with the up and down, the elevation swings that comes along. I'm really going to have to make a decision on this because there's guys in the $7,000 range that I like as well. So when we return with Rick and Ben, we're going to dig into that $7,000 range. But first, I'm going to ask the crew who they think are going to be the highest owned players at this year's Masters in the Millionaire Maker. Stay tuned. In the midst of the best year of his career, coming in hot with an excellent track record at the Masters and a price tag that fits almost any lineup construction, it's almost impossible for Matt Kuchar not to be the highest owned player in the Millionaire Maker. He's gained on approaches in 8 straight events, made the cut at Augusta 9 straight years with 3 top 5 results, and is one of the few entrants who has a positive rating in all 3 aspects of tee to green and putting. Kuch is a perfect storm right now. With this ownership, should you fade him? I'm not here to talk you off Kuch, because if you think he's going to win, you have to play him since you're going to need the winner. All I'll say is Finau, Louis, Reed, Cantlay, Leishman, Stenson, and Sergio are all within $300 of Kuchar's price and may all carry less than half of his ownership. So that's my lean. I'll check into DK Live's Jeff Ulrich for his pick. Jeff, who do you think is going to be the highest owned player in the DraftKings Millionaire Maker?
This one's honestly, it's just too easy. It's got to be Matt Kuchar. I mean, the player's won twice on the season already, coming in off a solo second place finish in the WGC match play, which everyone was watching. And he's under 8K in price. I mean, he's up to 16th in the world golf rankings already. There's a ton of players above him and played way worse, way higher up in the rankings. Bubba Watson, Phil, Patrick Reed. I mean, these guys just have been tailing off while Matt Kuchar just stayed steady since the start of the year. And you also look at Matt Kuchar's course history. This is a player who's played the Masters 9 years in a row now and never missed a cut. He's also finished inside the top 25, like 80% of those starts. So there's really nothing to poke holes in for Matt Kuchar this week. He's just underpriced at under 8K. And really, if you want some swerve plays, I mean, Mark Leishman is fine. Ian Poulter might actually be the play that I'd go to if you're really looking to get off Matt. But the other players are not that appealing. I mean, you don't want to play Henrik Stenson at the Masters. At least I don't. So Matt Kuchar, my pick for the highest owned player at the 2019 Masters.
Davis?
Sergio Garcia, former winner of this tournament at 7,700, and Hideki Matsuyama at 8,700. Hideki is always very owned at these majors, even if the public doesn't think he carries a ton of win equity. He does do DraftKings scoring. He'll be touted, definitely on the Mayo show, definitely on pretty much all PGA DFS platforms he'll be touted, and I think that Sergio will be as well, and those guys do fit lineup construction really well. Sergio can pretty much be put in any lineup construction. You could even roster him with 2 of the guys above 10K. Hideki fits a balanced contrarian lineup, or you can fit him in with Rory or DJ. So my 2 guesses for highest owned are Hideki Matsuyama and Sergio Garcia.
Reed Fowler.
Dustin Johnson at 11,300. Whenever you don't see DJ at the top, I think it's going to garner a lot of ownership. And look, rightfully so. I mean, this guy is clearly the #1 player right now. He can ball strike with the best of them. When he gets that putter going, he's virtually unstoppable. And if you take a look at his recent finishes here, he hasn't had a worse than a top 10 if obviously we take out 2017 when he fell before he actually could get on the course, on the stairs there where he didn't play and he withdrew. But if you look at the last 3 or 4 years, he's been playing extremely well at this course. Another one of these players that needs a finish at a major, a top finish at a major. When you don't get him at the highest priced person on the slate, he's going to garner a lot of ownership. You're going to find value elsewhere. It's going to offer some salary relief. And so DJ will be the highest owned this week, in my opinion.
Drew?
Justin Rose. He always seems to garner a lot of ownership. The savings off of Rory McIlroy, I think a lot of people flock to Justin Rose. 10.8, he's a good play, but I think a lot of people see that he's going to be the highest owned in the entire field.
As you just heard, I think that Matt Kuchar is going to be the highest owned player in the Millionaire Maker at the Masters this year, and he leads off the $7,000 range, coming in at $7,900. Right below him, we got Mark Leishman, Sergio, Cantlay, Poulter, Stenson, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, Gary Woodland, Cam Smith, who went a top 5 at this event last year, Webb Simpson, who made back-to-back Eagles at this event last year, Pepperell, Fitzpatrick, Charles, just cross those guys off. You have Terrell Hatton, Brant Snedeker, Haotong, Brennan Grace, who was actually 3rd in strokes gained approach plus around the green last season, Matt Wallace, Horschel, Keegan, Thorbjorn Olesen, and Charles Howell III. Those are all the players in the $7,000 range. Ben, you got to pick one. I mean, you can pick multiple guys, but who's the one guy who does stand out to you the most?
Probably Sergio. I wanted to say Leishman, but Sergio's just, to me, he's playing well enough. I thought the price would be a little higher, to be honest. And, past winner, obviously. He's a guy I feel pretty confident. Kuchar's going to be really popular. We know he's playing well. I just, again, when you have these concentrations of ownership, it's not like there's one pivot and you're like, all right, I can go to this guy. You have 5, 6, 7 reasonable options, all who are going to be less owned than Kuchar. It's a tough ask for me to say I think Kuchar beats them all. So I'm more apt to try to pivot, Sergio being one of them, Leishman another.
Let's say that Kuchar comes inside the top 15 at Valero. Rick. He's already off to a very hot first round. He's in the clubhouse. He's probably going to make the cut. So let's say the good vibes continue with Kuchar. I could see him being north of 30% here.
Absolutely. The Kuchar is like almost the free space in most majors because his price is always so low. He's always so consistent. He finds a way to backdoor a top 10 or a top 15 almost every time he tees it up. And this is probably the best season he's had like in a while, right? I mean, he's been awesome this year. So yeah, if he goes out and posts another finish, especially, he benefited from this pricing coming out so early that he had the deep run in the match play. And then if he goes and has another deep run and still sitting there at $7,900, it's going to be a free space for a lot of owners.
It's going to be a free space for a lot of owners, but this is us. This is the Millionaire Maker. We talk about ownership. We talk about leverage. If he is north of 30%, I work with this one of two ways. That if you think a player is going to win, especially at a smaller field like this, and where you need to have the winner on your team, unless like Sandy Lyle wins, who no one has, then you can need the guy who's going to come in second. But if you really think the Kuchar is going to win, you have to play him. He rates out fantastically, and this isn't just like a good year in his career. This is the best year of his career, to be perfectly honest with you. He is peaking at absolutely the right time. He hasn't missed the cut here in the past 9 years. He has 3 top 5s in that time, 4 top 10s. He's been fantastic, but I don't think that he's going to win, Ben. And like you mentioned, Sergio's there, Leishman's there, Stenson's there, Poulter's there. And all those guys are going to come in at least half the ownership, maybe 4 times less the ownership. And I just don't think that Kuchar's that much better than them.
Agree. Yeah, absolutely. Ownership is very important. There's no doubt, but it shouldn't take you off plays that you like. If Kuchar plays very well, it doesn't matter if he's, you want him on your team, but you're just weighing the balance of risk reward and how often you have to get it correct. If you can take out a third of a field that big with a simple pivot of a guy that's probably a coin toss to beat Kuchar, that's something that I think obviously more times than not you should be doing.
Like, Rick, who's a better play? Matt Kuchar at 32% or Patrick Reed at 5%?
Oh man, it's 5% is like the holy grail. So you could almost give me anyone at 5%. So in that case, I'd still take Patrick Reed.
All right. Well, how about Kuchar at 32%, Leishman at 11%?
Yeah, it's getting a lot closer. I do agree with the sentiment of being able to drop 30% off the field. I would almost always lean towards Leishman there.
And you have to concede that if Kuchar wins, you're dead if you don't have any Kuchar. But I think that those are the risks that I think a lot of people don't consider when they're going in, that you're not going to be right. If you play 40 times a year and you play these giant GPPs, you just need to be right the one time. If it lines up at the Masters, you win $1 million. But, when I think about me at the Masters, I was horrible at the Masters last year. My DraftKings teams were terrible. And then all of a sudden, Heritage comes around the next week, I win $20K on a $5 entry. So you need to take the right logic to some of these things and just realize that you're going to bust out from time to time. And if Kuchar really is going to be the highest owned guy, and he is going to be over 30% owned, I just don't think I can play him, Ben.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a situation where you want to define what you want to do, and you also want to define, do you want Kuchar to be your stand? If you don't know and you're playing enough lineups, match him and move on and make your stand elsewhere. For me, I'm definitely going to come in underweight. I'll have a couple outs. I certainly hope he plays bad. Sorry, Kuchar, but it's just not a spot for me where I think I'm going to. If you want real leverage, you might have to put 50% of your lineups on Kuchar, and I think there's too many other plays for me to do that.
So, Rick, Ben had mentioned that Sergio is his favorite play in this upper $7,000 range. I'm never on this guy, but Patrick Cantlay is really sticking out like a sore thumb for me. He lost 3 strokes putting at the Masters last year. We know about his ball striking acumen. He's getting better around the greens, too, which is just absolutely fantastic that he can't hit it into a greenside bunker. It's an automatic double bogey these days. That's good news when it pertains to Patrick Cantlay. But I think about all the ownership here, and just no one's going to own him. At least I don't think they are.
And I think you're correct about that. What I don't think a lot of people realize is Cantlay's pretty sneaky long off the tee. He makes a ton of birdies last year, missing the cut, but it was his first time at Augusta, which we've talked about a million times. I agree.
It was his second time at Augusta. He played as he played as like an amateur like 10 years ago,
2012,
and made the cut that year.
Right, and missed the cut last year. You're absolutely right. So I think. There are times to make a stand on someone like Matt Kuchar, who's going to be very highly owned, but this range offers more options, right? You don't need with Sergio, with Cantlay, with Stenson, who I even like there's so many other ways that you can get into the same price range. You're not forced into Matt Kuchar, which I think is a real reasonable request to just go and grab one of these other guys.
So I like Cantlay. I really like Poulter. I like Poulter more if the wind does pick up and the conditions become crappy, but he's just another guy who's, I think it's one of his last shots to actually win. He seems really dialed in right now. Just even his overall game, like he's not long off the tee at all. And like you mentioned with Cantlay, he's sneakily over the past 24 rounds inside the top 10 in this field, number 9 in driving distance gained, which I think is very notable. Poulter is not. He's 59th in the field as it pertains to driving distance gained. And maybe that will take me off of all of the shares that I wanted to play with him. He might be a better bet to win and come inside the top 10 than he is actually a DraftKings play. Maybe that's a hedge you can make. But the other guy that's sitting right there is Stenson, who has been fire with his approaches lately. Just the results haven't been there. He's been bad off the tee. He's been bad around the greens. But when we just talk about iron play only, Rick, Stenson's been good.
Stenson is the guy that I have a nice gold star next to on my list in this range here. And if you look kind of longer term, right, his stats are pretty bad. More recently, they get a lot better. And then if you just kind of followed along with him at the match play, I mean, he had a round at the match play that was reminiscent of his Open Championship duel with Phil Mickelson. I mean, the guy was hitting everything to 2 feet. And I just think that this is a really good spot in this range at only $7,600. He's one of the biggest beneficiaries of this price coming out early.
So what do you make of Stenson, Ben? Do you think you'll be in on him and just hope that approach continues? Because if we're talking like 175 or 175 to 200, I mean, that's Stenson's wheelhouse. And any place where Justin Rose is going to be good, you best believe Henrik Stenson's going to be good too.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think the nice thing about Stenson is he's one of the guys, as Rick just said, who probably is underpriced based off what we've seen post-lock. But he's not going to get an ownership bump that I think is equivalent to it because there's so many other people. Kuchar carries that torch in the same range. So you're kind of getting some of that benefit. Stenson showed last year, I don't read much into that stuff where he obviously hadn't had the best track record at Augusta for a guy that talented. He was 5th last year, though. Certainly can get it done here. Depending on ownership, as I always say, we'll see. But I'm definitely in on him on the whole. I think it's a pretty good spot.
Since the triple miscut through the Middle Eastern swing on the European Tour to open the season, he came over to WGC Mexico. He bled 5 strokes off the tee. He was horrible. Since then, since the Arnold Palmer Classic, 6.7 strokes gained on approach, 2.5 at the Players, even though he missed the cut. So that was just 2 rounds. 7.3 at the Valspar. Like I said, the putting just hasn't been good, but that's all on Bermuda grass. Maybe we get him on some fast bet and all of a sudden he's looking great. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you're willing to take that shot with a guy like Stenson, no doubt about it.
So is there anyone else in this lower $7,000 range? Because initially we had talked at the beginning if you want to stack 2 of the high price guys, Rick, or even you wanted to go Rickie and Rory, that you would immediately have to drop down to the upper 6s, lower 7s. Who are the guys down here that you're actually targeting?
Yeah. So actually, I think that Matt Wallace is pretty interesting at $7,100. You know, he's one of these guys that I kind of compare him to Brandt Snedeker a little bit, where around the green they play well. He's played here before, this is Matt Wallace's first start here, so he has that going against him. But otherwise, he's one of these guys at $7,100 who fits a lot of the lineups. But the question that I have that I've been staring at is, how come Gary Woodland's not good here? Right? Like he's long enough off the tee. He makes enough birdies. He seems to do things that would fit, and he's missed 3 cuts in a row at the Masters. Like why can't he play here?
I have no real logical explanation for it, because if you look statistically, in full disclosure, I'm looking at the past 24 rounds right now. Gary Woodland rates out 5th in this field for me in like the actual key stats that you want to look at.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know if this is kind of a situation where like Molinari's math doesn't add up. Woodland's math doesn't add up either. We talk about how important experience is at Augusta. But maybe he's a better guy to like bet or something like that, where you can just take a pure flyer on him. But like, I just can't stop staring at his stat line. And then I look to the right and I look at his history, and it's just absolutely abysmal.
Well, you can turn it around here. You can have a bad history, then all of a sudden you can flip a switch. Like Brendan Grace was miscut. And those were years where he was pretty good. Then all of a sudden he's T27, T24. Like he's getting better year after year. And I had even mentioned him when I talked about strokes gained approach plus around the green. He was 3rd in the field a year ago. He was not putting well because Brendan Grace never putts well. And when he does, he tends to win. He's been kind of heating up lately too. Ben, I kind of like Snedeker and Grace down in this range.
I was going to use Sneds. Yeah, Sneds is very interesting to me. We know around the green has been absolutely fire. Off the tee is the problem. And Augusta, you can't put it in the trees, but it's pretty generous. So if that's not a big factor, I think he sets up well. Obviously played really well at the Players. Can I suggest Fitzy, or is that not allowed on this show?
That would be outrageous.
I'll say this. Fitzy's one of the guys, and this is kind of a common thread that we've been discussing. If it's really windy, really tough conditions, I don't mind that. If it's a lower scoring where guys are making a lot of birdies, probably not for me. But always like to give him a shout out when I can get him in a few lineups.
I can get on board with Fitzy if it is going to be bad conditions. And I even mentioned back to API with Molinari. We saw that Fitzpatrick is one of these players that, despite being a very short hitter, actually seems better suited for longer courses than shorter courses. Like every time he goes to Heritage, it's like, oh, this sets up perfectly for the guy that hits every fairway but only drives the ball 250 yards, and he's just absolute trash there every single year. And even at match play, like that, like Austin CC should be a course that sets up perfectly for him. It's just not. But he's played really well at the Masters year after year after year. I just don't like Matthew Fitzpatrick, so I'm not going to use him. The guy that I would rather use in his place, and maybe it depends on how he does at Valero, but I really like what Hao Tong did at the match play. I really liked how Hao Tong played at the Masters last year, Rick, and he has sneaky distance.
That is the exact way I would use to describe him, is sneaky long, where I agree with you. He's got some chops, man. He kind of folded. I think his last match at the match play, he got absolutely run over, but otherwise he was really good. The shots that I got to see of him, I was pretty impressed. And when I looked him up, I kind of had a similar notion, Pat, which is, wow, this guy's longer than I thought. And this could be someone I could plug into a few lineups.
Is Cam Smith too trash to play right now? Because I think that he might be.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I just compared to his peers, I think there's just much better options. He's not good enough.
And like Webb is sitting right there, Ben. The only reason that Webb finished, like he made the cut last year, and then on Sunday he actually did make 2 consecutive eagles by chipping in from the middle of the fairway. Like that's not going to happen again. So it's a very Webb thing to do, I think. It's just I want no part of it. Like I look down here, like CH3, Billy Horschel, Keegan Bradley, Thorbjorn Olesen. I can't see myself playing any of those guys.
Not for me. The one guy, and I don't really have anything to back it up, but he seems to just be coasting every Friday. And then I look and he misses the cut by like 7 strokes where he implodes. It's Ty Hatton, who I'm kind of interested in at 7,200, just as a very extreme dark horse. I think he has some skill sets that could translate here, but he has to stop with these. I mean, it's absurd how all of a sudden it goes bad, and it goes real bad.
Do you think that people are going to play CH3, Rick? Because he hasn't played in the Masters since 2012, shockingly enough. He came 19th that year, which is pretty good. He has a lot of distance. He's played well at Riviera over the years. He's from Augusta, Georgia. He knows this course really, really well. Should we be using him? And do you think that people will use him?
I don't think they will. We're just kind of spitballing a lot of names down here,
Yeah.
which when there are a lot of names, I think it just gets all divided up. But to your point, compared to some of his peers down here, he might be one of the better options. He's someone that I'm more comfortable with, right? I think we kind of talked about range of outcomes. I think his range of outcomes is a little bit capped, where if you're trying to win something like the Millie Maker, but when you're down here, you really need just one piece of information or one stat to kind of throw a dart. And I'd certainly rank him better than a lot of these other guys.
Okay, so coming up, Rick and Ben shall return to talk about the $6,000 range. But first, the best, biggest, baddest fades of the Masters for 2019. And spoiler alert, mine's going to be in the 6K range. Stay tuned. Following his win at the match play, his local ties, along with the $6,700 price tag, Kevin Kisner's shaping up to be one of the most popular plays. Not just of the cheap guys, but of anyone in the field. Mistake. Kisner's fine. He may even challenge the top 20 if things break right. This is the sort of stand you need to make to separate your lineups from the competition. Kisner's going to be last man in on a lot of lineups. And where has Kisner excelled in his career? The Players, Colonial, Heritage, RSM, Match Play, short courses, generally on Bermuda greens, which these are not. When you get to a bomber's paradise like Augusta, too much needs to go right for him to challenge to win. Likely why he's never finished better than T28 in 3 starts, despite leading the field in strokes gained putting a year ago, and basically last in strokes gained approach. For Kiz to have a realistic shot at contending, he's going to need extreme weather, like we saw with the Danny Willett or Zach Johnson year, where it's cold, windy, and making pars is going to keep you in contention. Because if conditions are optimal, he just doesn't have the juice off the tee to compete in a birdie fest at a course this long. If we get word that hurricane season is a blowing through, I'll change my tune. As it stands right now, no Kisner for me. But that's me. Let's find out who Davis Maddock is fading.
It has to be Tiger Woods. Not that I don't think Tiger can compete here, but there's just no way to roster all of these guys. I like Rory and Dustin a significant bit more than Tiger Woods, and I prefer Justin Thomas, who is cheaper than him. Woods is sort of priced like the 2008 version of Tiger Woods, the dominant Tiger Woods that we all remember. And that's just not the golfer that he is anymore. He is more of a grinder. His off-the-tee game is just not nearly as strong as it was during his peak. And my guess would be is that Tiger is actually going to be underdogs to a lot of these guys in head-to-heads in the betting markets. And if you are taking your indications from the betting markets, Woods would sort of be the easy fade in this group. Again, not that I don't think Tiger can compete, but you have to make some choices at the top. And Woods' game just right now does not fit Augusta the same way that Rory and Dustin or even JT's game does.
Drew Matthews.
High-end fade. That's going to be Mr. JT. At 10.2, I'm not really sure this is the best track for him. A couple years ago, I'd probably say it was, but he really hasn't been playing well lately. Hasn't played well at Augusta. So JT is my high-end fade.
Reed Fowler. Who you fading?
Jon Rahm. He's a popular play. Look, he's coming in 20 to 25% in my early projections for ownership, and rightfully so. That salary allows you a lot with your other ancillary players on your roster. But if you just look at these top elite guys, he is the worst when it comes to strokes gained approach. And that's really what we've been seeing from Jon Rahm this season, is that he just hasn't gotten his irons going. And just between the ears, mentality-wise, how much of an eject factor is Jon Rahm a la Sergio Garcia getting a 15 last year? We see at Sawgrass where he just didn't make the right decision fighting with his caddy, and that's not necessarily it. It's just with the approach shots, I'm a little worried. Here at Augusta, you're definitely going to need your approach shots to be there. I just rather pay down for Brooks at 9,500 or up for Justin Rose if that's the case. So I'm going to be fading Jon Rahm this week.
Jeff?
Jon Rahm. And I know that this pick might induce some excitement, maybe cause some people to come at me on the Twitter machine with some comments, but I just don't want to pay $10K for Jon Rahm in a major championship. And this is a player who's missed the cut in 3 of his last 8 major championship starts. And look, people, I know he was top 5 at the PGA. I know he's top 5 at this event last year, but it just means increased expectations for Jon Rahm this year. And we saw what happened to him on the back 9 of the Players. This is a player whose ball striking has been a little bit more inconsistent, I think, than people realize. Coming in 63rd in strokes gained approach. I had to have another reason not to play him. It couldn't just be the major championship history. But look, I think Jon Rahm's going to win lots of majors over his career. I just don't think he's quite figured out how to perform consistently on the big stage. And for 10K in price, I don't really want a boomer bust type of player for my DraftKings lineup. So Jon Rahm, for me, 10K in price. He's going to be my high-end fade for this year's Masters.
If you're going to stack at the very top and take two guys above 10K or do one of those Rory Rickie builds, you're eventually going to have to dip your toe into the $6,000 area. So we need to parse out who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, and where are some landmines and chalk bombs you may want to avoid. So if we go to the very top of the list in the $6,000 area, we start to see a few names pop up. You got Danny Willett, Alex Noren, Zach Johnson, and if conditions get bad, all three of those guys are live. If they're good conditions, you don't want any part of them, at least in my opinion. Charlie Hoffman, Mr. Masters first round himself, JB Holmes, Party Marty Keimer, Killa Keith Mitchell, and then you got Kevin Kisner, Rick, who I just said is going to be my fade of the tournament. If it does get windy, maybe he's a bit more live, but this is just not a course where I see him doing well. That last season at the Masters, he lost 8 strokes between approach and around the green. How did he mitigate that difference? Well, he gained 8 strokes on the green. He was number 1 in the field in strokes gained putting. And it's just really hard to repeat. I know he's a good putter, but this isn't the Heritage. This isn't the Players. This isn't TPC Austin. It's not a short course where Kevin Kisner excels. It is a super long course, and he's going to be over 25% owned. I guarantee it. So that's just a no-go for me right off the hop.
Yeah, we talk a lot about good chalk and bad chalk, and this is bad chalk, man. And this is a guy who is going to be very popular, who does not fit the course. He's not nearly long enough. He has like one specific out for him to get you value back. There is no chance that Kevin Kisner is going to come anywhere near my lineups, and I'm happy to be fading him with you.
What do you make of it, Ben? And do you think he'll be as popular as I think he will? Because I think that you're going to see whatever happens up top. Like Rory's going to be super highly owned, Rickie's going to be super highly owned, Kuchar's going to be super highly owned, and Kisner is going to be super highly owned. I would imagine you see those 4 guys on the most duplicated lineups.
I think he's going to be super popular relative to his price. So, in pure ownership, I don't think he approaches what those other guys will. But like you just said, on lineups where you need a guy in the 6K, like he is going to be the last man in on a ton of builds. And that makes him obviously very dangerous to roster.
We've seen this go the other way, because I remember the first year with the Millionaire Maker, Kevin Na and Charlie Hoffman were the 2 uber chalk guys. And the pricing was different then. So they were at like 62 and 6,300. And what happened? They were like 17 and 18% owned, and they came through. They were on the winning roster. So it's not to say that, chalk is bad down in this area. It just seems like, to what we were talking about before, Rick, about if there's a stand to make and you can avoid a huge chunk of ownership, this really, I am not decided on Kuchar yet. I'm probably not going to play him, but that terrifies me. It does not terrify me to fade Kevin Kisner.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, just be aware, right? Like if you're rostering one 30% guy or one 20% guy, you don't want 6 of them. And it's a situation where, fading Kisner feels a lot better than fading some of the guys at the top. If he ends up winning it, fine. There's just so many different ways that you can get there. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one specific spot, which I have a feeling, to Ben's point, when I've got $6,900 left, it's easy for me to come down and click Kevin Kisner's name and say, oh, he's playing well. At least if you're going to eat chalk with guys that fit, guys that make sense, like someone maybe like a Kuchar, who's objectively much better play and much better course fit than someone like Kevin Kisner is.
So who do we actually like in the $6,000 range? The 2 that I've identified, I like JB Holmes, and weirdly, JB Holmes very good in the wind. We just saw him win at Riviera, which is a corollary course, in very windy conditions over the weekend. He played really well. We talked about that Phil Stenson super windy British Open. JB Holmes was actually 3rd in that, and he came 4th 2 years ago here at the Masters, came 50th last year. I think he's in spotty form, which is really good for his ownership, because you can either, I remember when he won Houston the week before the Masters, 3 years ago, he came out and missed the cut, and he was 25% owned. He was the Kevin Kisner of that year. But this year, unless somehow he wins Valero, he's going to be 3% owned. And I think that his skill set matches up really well here, Rick.
Yeah, I completely agree. Holmes is one I had a check mark next to, and Keith Mitchell as well. They're two of the longer guys off the tee in this range. Actually, Keith Mitchell has the best off the tee numbers of anyone under $7,500. So he is pretty useful when we're looking for off the tee stats. Those are the two that I would probably be banking my shares on. Both $6,800. Both I'm way more comfortable with than someone like Kisner, God forbid, Charlie Hoffman. So I'll roster those two.
What do you make of those two, Ben? So you have two ultra bombers. You got Killa Keith, who played well at a windy course, a shorter course, but a windy course where players like Brooks and Rickie played well when he won Honda. It seems like his putting has really come around. Do you worry that he's never played here before and that might be a reason to fade him?
I do. Obviously Keith Mitchell's been impressive lately. He's really turned it around. I worry about his scrambling a bit, this putting. Obviously it's bent grass, and just this is a different animal. So the difference though for me is there's not a ton. When we talked about Kuchar, it's like, well, I'm not in love with Kuchar, and I have these 8 options. I don't have many. I wish I could say, well, I don't like Keith Mitchell because I love these 3 guys. I don't have a ton down here, so I think I'm going to be forced to either build where I end with CH3, who's at the bottom of the 7K range, or I take just a flyer here and there because I really don't have a ton. Guys like Rio, Aaron Wise, I'll probably take some, but it's very hard to trust those type of guys. I think that's more of just deep tournament plays.
Well, if the Masters had been contested this week instead of the Valero Texas Open, Lucas Beauregard would have been like 23% owned at $6,400, Ben. But if he misses the cut at Valero, what do you see happening to his ownership? Or do people just say, he's $6,400, he makes my Rory lineups work, I don't care?
It's definitely going to take a hit. There will still be people who need a sub 6'5" guy, and he's got a lot of press lately, and people are going to want to play him to an extent. So, what I try to do in situations like this, even with Kisner, just going back to him for a second, I don't mind playing them. I try to figure out the pairs of who's going to be really popular, who's attached to them. And then I play them in weird lineup construction. So if they do go off, I'm still in a different spot. And if they combust, then I take out a lot of the field. So it's really just about visualizing what kind of builds those guys are in, and if you want to play them, where to be different.
Where do you think the cutoff is, Ben, for players you're just physically not going to play? Because I'm looking at it right now, and unless I can talk myself into Kevin Tway, which I just can't, that I don't see myself playing anyone under $6,600, like at all, like 0%.
Yeah, I don't think anybody under Wise who is 6,600. I don't know who Takumi Kanyana is, and Devin Bling. That's a pretty sick name, but no, I'm not going to reach for one of those guys.
What do you think, Rick? Where do you think the cutoff point is where you just say, nope, not playing them?
Yeah, I think naturally my builds are probably going to end closer to 7,000, but there is literally no chance I play, and I'd include Wise. I won't play Wise, and I won't play anybody below him. So Siwoo Kim, who if he goes out and freaking wins this Valero, you're going to see a big ownership there. And then Kyle Stanley are the last guys that I would even remotely consider.
The only one below that level at 6,500 that I would consider, just because he has a pretty decent course history here. His game isn't where it has been over the past few years, but he's still really good around the green. We know he's a pretty good ball striker. Stuart Sink. Like, he's actually still kind of good, but maybe his time has passed. I don't really know. Do you have any thoughts, Rick, about Stuart Sink whatsoever?
No, pretty much no thoughts on Stuart Sink. He hasn't played here in any of the last 4 years. I think his window has closed, but you could always roster like Bernhard Langer. He will be like in the top 5 after the first round. I guarantee it.
Oh, probably. And listen, after saying that there's no chance that he wins, he probably comes out and wins as a 60-year-old. But like, Ben, did you agree? I couldn't remember. Did you agree with me or not on like you want to maximize all 6 spots on your roster to give yourself a legitimate chance to win with all those 6 spots? Wasting it on one of these guys down here just doesn't seem optimal to me.
Absolutely, because it's not. I know we talk about Langer that he's super safe and he is relative. It's not like he can't. He's missed a couple cuts in recent years here. These guys have just as much risk as some of the others. It's just I would be stunned if they really truly contended. The one guy, if I had to pick someone, Kevin Na, just kind of your Stuart Sink to my Kevin Na style. But I am not looking to end lineups here unless I really need to for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer Kevin Na. If anyone below 6,600 Kevin Na would be my selection. Maybe I'll have to dig into Kevin Na a little bit more because he's someone who's coming off a really great match play. Ever since he buddied up with Tiger, now they're all best friends. He seems super loose out on the course. And he is someone who has an excellent Genesis track record over the years, despite being a very short hitter, plays Riviera super well, and is immaculate around the greens. Can he start rolling those putts? We've seen him do it at the Masters before. So he's very, very good on these fast greens as well. So I'm not out on Kevin Na whatsoever. I got to see if he fits the right lineup construction. But if you had to pick one guy to win from down in this area, Rick, who would it be? Because I think the answer is actually Siwoo.
Oh, I think the answer is most certainly Siwoo, and it's because he makes a ton of birdies, right? His birdie or better percentage. He's playing well literally at the moment. His around the green game is one of the best in the field. When we talk about range of outcomes, Siwoo's range of outcomes are first and dead last. So at least first is in his range of outcomes. Some of these other guys don't even have that. So it is most certainly Siwoo.
Yeah, that would be sort of my point on it too, Ben, is that, Siwoo can contend with Rory somehow when he's at the top of his game because he becomes like the most lights out player on earth. Did have a top 5 finish at Riviera this year too, but I don't think any of that stuff matters with Siwoo. It's either he's on and he's awesome, or he's going to finish behind Mike Weir.
Yeah, there are certain guys like that where recent form and almost anything, it's just when they seem to turn it on at random and they lose it at random. So barring, I'd be more apt to say that some of these guys can compete in serious weather, whether it's Zach Johnson, Kisner, guys like that. They're going to need elements to play a role. If it's played quote unquote straight up, it's pretty dire. I guess Siwoo, Charlie Hoffman, but I don't trust any of these guys at all.
I think that's the way that you really need to approach the $6,000 range. You need to look at that weather report and say, hey, who can I get through the cut? And if there are big conditions, that does bring the Willets, the Norins, the Kisners, the Zach Johnsons, those type of grinders, even Kyle Stanley, potentially, just because of his accuracy off the tee, how good of a ball striker he is. He is someone that you might want to consider in your lineup. But again, if this is going to be a birdie fest, you want guys like Siwoo who are going to go out there and pin stock the entire time. Plus, Siwoo has some of the best touch around the greens of anyone on tour, Ben.
No, Siwoo, it's just with him, that you're taking extreme risk, even when it looks like it sets up well. So that is what it is. You're not going to find safety in the 6K range, but you got to embrace that. And as we've all said, this is a really easy cut to make. Like, you should be able to grind out even if you don't have it through Friday, and then you can always outscore where you're at and make a move.
Well, before we end up picking our winners here, Rick, do you have any final thoughts, something you wanted to mention about building your lineups or about the Masters in general?
No, I think it maybe just because it's fresh, because Ben kind of alluded to it. I'm treating this almost as if a no-cut event. I mean, you can see these losers down here at the bottom that should be padding our 6 of 6 stats that, if you get through, give me the guys who can make a bunch of birdies, where we've seen guys like Justin Rose, who's obviously an elite player, but, make the cut on the number, then get hot on the weekend. We've seen Hideki do it. There are guys who are going to make the cut on the number and finish like top 10 in this event. So I'm treating it almost as if a no-cut event. I'm really leaning on the big time birdie makers, and hopefully their DraftKings scoring can outpace their finishing position.
Yeah, the DraftKings scoring is something to really look at, even over finishing position, just because Eagles are so prevalent at Augusta National that guys like JB Holmes, guys like Keith Mitchell from down in this range, like Rick had pointed out earlier, the driving distance does correlate so much at Augusta National to DraftKings scoring that might even give them a bigger bump, that even if they finish like T25, they might actually finish like T13 in DraftKings scoring. You can get away with a little bit, and that's why I like to use these $6,000 guys to my advantage. I still need them to make the cut. That would be great. But Ben, do you agree that like people are going to look at their lineups and say, oh, I got 6 of 6 through. This is great. I'm going to cash this week. There's going to be plenty of 6 of 6 lineups that do not make the money.
For sure. This is one of the tournaments. It feels a little uncomfortable, but I think you want to kind of, I don't want to say fly too close to the sun, because that's not what you want to do, but you want to take some added risk. And up your miscut equity in certain spots, honestly, because if you get through, the reward is going to be good. And if you go, if you build like a very cashy lineup, you might cruise through. But if you're ending in all these guys in the T20s, it's not going to do anything with so many different variations of these top talents up top.
All right, so that is the $6,000 range. That's all of the players in the field, how you need to approach the Masters Millionaire Maker. But the big thing is, if you're going to win the Masters Millionaire Maker, you're going to need to have the winner on your team. So who we taking to win? Stay tuned. It's time to pick a winner. No more, I like this guy, but I also like this guy in certain spots. Like Highlander, there can be only one. For me, it's Dustin Johnson. DJ's got the game, DJ's got the history, DJ's got the form, DJ's got the results of corollary courses, and best of all, DJ's got adaptability. He doesn't struggle in any part of his game, and he doesn't struggle in any sort of weird conditions. Plus, he may be aerobic, so as long as Paulina remembers to plug him in the night before, he can avoid slipping down the stairs of his Airbnb. Dustin wears the green jacket. Rick, who you taking to win?
My pick to win this week is Justin Thomas. His distance off the tee and his big-time birdie-making ability has him in contention no matter what the cut number is going to be. So it'll be Sunday evening, and JT will be donning the green jacket.
Ben Rasa, who's your winner?
I think that this is Justin Rose's spot. As much as I'd like Rory to win, Rose is able to handle any conditions. He's been so close before. I have a feeling this is the week that he breaks through, takes down the green jacket.
Davis?
Rory McIlroy. He has great course form here, though he has never won. He has strung together a bunch of good results here. He's playing some of the best golf of his career right now, winning the Players' Championship, playing well pretty much at every tournament that he's been at this year. He's had a couple rough Sundays, but I don't expect that to be something that is part of Rory's game. I just think that when you're always in contention, you're not always going to win. Not everyone is Tiger in the mid-2000s. That's just not the way that it goes, but Rory has the strongest off the tee game. He's good with his wedges. The greens are a little tricky, of course, for him, but he's played this course so many times. I don't expect him to be, the worst in the field at putting or anything like that. He is, of course, the favorite, so it's not like I'm going out on a limb here, but I do believe that Rory McIlroy will win the 2019 Masters.
Reed?
Justin Thomas as one of the best players and one of the elites on tour so far this season, and over the past few years, this guy comes in elite in all categories, key statistics that you want. Strokes gained par 4, he's top 5. You look at ball striking around the green, a rare talent that can hit the ball far and have a lot of touch around the greens. If you look at his finishes since 2016, they have been getting better every single year. You want someone who's been playing well, not just here at Augusta, but recent form. Yes, he hasn't had the best finishes over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but go back a little bit further and you see top 10s, top 5s, and some top 3s for Justin Thomas in strong field. So my pick again for the 2019 Masters, Justin Thomas.
Drew?
Man, I really, really like Tiger this week. I think Tiger's going to have a good shot. He's coming in with good form. Loves Augusta. Tiger's my pick to win Augusta 2019.
Jeff, who you got winning?
Pat, if I was making my pick to win with my brain this week, I'd probably go with Bryson DeChambeau. But unfortunately for the people watching, that's generally not how I make my picks. I go with my heart, Pat. I go with my gut. I'm going to go with Louis Oosthuizen. And maybe it's because I bet him every week and eventually he's due to win. But I also think there's some good karma going on with Louis here over the last month. He's recommitted himself to the game of golf 2019, shed the dad bod. And at the start of the year, he had a big win in South Africa. And I mean, I think that momentum is carried over somewhat here. Over the last month or so, he's really, really shown some good ball striking off the tee, which I think is a really good sign. If those scoring clubs do get going, I think he's got the form to contend this week. And this is a player who's got some really, really solid under-the-radar course history at Augusta. Obviously lost in a playoff in 2011 to Bubba Watson, but played well here last year too. I like the way Louis is coming into this event. He's going to be my pick to win the 2019 Masters.
And that'll do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Masters, DraftKings, Millionaire Maker preview. Want to remind everyone, if you, yes you, want to get in the draw for over $1,000 in giveaways, go subscribe, rate, and review the audio podcast 5 stars along with your DraftKings handle. Something nice about the show. That'd be terrific. And smash the like button for the video. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section along with your pick to win. And follow and share the show on Facebook and Twitter at the PME and reply with your DraftKings handle. And finally, follow me on Insta at the PME. Go heart the Masters pick up there right now and comment with your DraftKings handle. Do them all. Do it often. for more ways to get in the draw for that $1,000. And if you want to get into a draw for a free yearly membership to fantasynational.com, the single best golf tools and stats site on the internet, go retweet the pinned tweet at FantasyNational on Twitter and follow it, reply the hashtag FNMasters. That simple. Finally, remember to enter the PME Masters DraftKings Open. Find the link in the description. $10 to enter, a rake-free $100,000 in the prize pool. $7,500 for first. I'll see you in there. Thank you for tuning in. Keep up on the feed for more content every single day until the Masters starts. Good luck. Someone go win $1 million if I can. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!